Sean, it's awesome to have you back. Aho, namaste to you, my friend, always. A perpetual, infinite
Hallelujah.
namaste. And as I was saying a minute ago, I just love having a chance to hang out with you and talk to you. You're one of my favorite people in the whole world to talk to. You know, everybody that's ever listened to any podcast with you anywhere knows the depth of Sean O'Leary is deep.
They're gluttons for punishment, Paul.
Well, yeah, but sometimes, as you know, awakening isn't always fun.
Yes, yeah.
And sometimes, the wise old man that whispers truth in your ear isn't exactly the person you want to hear from until you wake up and then you realize, thank God for that Sean O'Leary guy. It's been great to see you getting more awareness out there and getting some time with Aubrey. And you've been on his podcast a couple times now, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, when we did a few two podcasts, and then we did two roundtable. There's a roundtable group. So
very good.
We together 4 times.
Beautiful. And I listened to your podcast with Kyle. You did one with Kyle too, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I did 2 absolutely with Kyle over the years. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just exciting for me to see you getting the airtime that the world needs you to have.
Thank you, my brother.
I'm sure. Is it helping grow your?
It is. For me, the most important thing is just getting the message out there.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's a big difference from just having a small community of the same people to whom I speak every week. That's interesting, but it's like a small group of 60, 70 people. Whereas with some of these podcasts, I think the first one I did with Aubrey, went over 200,000. And so it's a totally different kind of outreach.
His audience is extremely responsive to my podcasts and to you and your messages. I've gotten more people into the Chek Academy from Aubrey's podcast than any other podcast except my own.
Brilliant.
And so I've been on podcasts that I've gotten just as many listens as Aubrey's, but maybe one person will, buy something from the Chek Institute, join the Chek Academy. But in Aubrey's podcast, it can be quite significant. So as much as a shitstorm has been going on with Aubrey's sharing of his, relationship with women, which I've helped him navigate, which is sad because he's just being honest and sharing. It just shows you, how entangled people are and how quick they are to judge and, a lot of projection. But sometimes we have to let people vomit until they realize it's on their lap first, They can call it Aubrey's all they want, but it's theirs. But what have you been up to otherwise since I last rapped with you?
Yeah, so I'm actually on vacation at the moment, or staycation. So I had my brother visiting from Ireland for a few weeks, and he brought out one of his daughters for a bit and one of his grandsons, and then for the second half of his trip, one of his granddaughters. So we've had family members here for the last 5 weeks, and they just went home on Tuesday. So it was great having him around.
Well, lovely. And thank you for spending time with me on your vacation. I feel blessed.
Sure, bro. Sure.
Well, there's a lot of things going on in the world, as we were discussing a minute ago, and it seems to be the perpetual state of the world. I mean, as long as I've been alive, there's been a Vietnam or a Watergate or something going on. It just never seems to stop, which I think is part of the process at the end of the day. So I'm wanting to share some dialogue with you on just, what can we all do to kind of move toward more harmony in the world and do our part as individuals. There's an old saying, I'm sure you know of it. I don't know who said it. You might know, dear Lord, give me the strength to change what I can and the wisdom to know what I can't.
And the wisdom to know the difference. So that was St. Francis.
Oh, St. Francis. Oh, good.
Yeah, and it was co-opted, I think, by AA. And they made it part of their prayer.
Right. Yeah. Well, I didn't learn it from AA.
Okay, good. You must have got it straight from Francis then.
I could have. I've read a fair bit of, writings about him and things. And I always thought he was just such a beautiful soul.
Yeah.
So I think where I'd like to dive in is, as we've shared, the world's going through challenges on many fronts. I'd like to take some time to share your deep spiritual wisdom and insights on the challenges we all face and the situation we've created in relationship to nature, because I think that's one of the least talked about issues going on. I just shared a post with a bunch of my friends that was put out by a beekeeper, and the research shows that 80% of the bee population worldwide is now dead. And, this is a very, very dangerous situation. And without a long discussion of the reasons why, for which there's two key ones, which I see as pesticide use and electromagnetic pollution.
Yes.
But like these are the things that are like should be on mainstream news, and we should all be scrambling to save the bees, right? I mean, that's like serious. The fact that these things aren't being talked about, and more oil and more this and more 5G and more, it's just like it makes you wonder how much of a crisis is it going to take to wake people up to what really matters in life and what true value is, and the importance of, it really reminds me of Jung's concept of the self with a capital SELF, and Jung's succinct description of the self is anything that supports your ability to live. Mm-hmm. And I think, we can get so caught up in the little self, and we can get caught up in the illusory self of media and social media and all the Luciferian projections of government. And we lose touch, first of all, with our self, which includes our soul and our spirit and the unconscious. And we can get so kind of trapped in the ego or the persona and forget about the importance of having a deeper relationship with ourself, which is really informed by the bigger self. So I think that there's a lot of ways we could diagnose this thing, but it seems to me that we're actually in a combination of a spiritual crisis and a spiritual awakening. And it's kind of like when people can't admit that they're addicted to drugs or alcohol, and everybody tells them, you're going to ruin your life, and you've lost 3 jobs, you've crashed your car twice, you need to go for help, and they deny and they deny and they deny. And then all of a sudden, something really terrible happens and they realize I need help. And so it's just like, there's the individual self, but then there's the collective culmination of, we're all part of the hive, so to speak. So if you got a lot of sick bees in a hive, the hive can't be healthy. And, sometimes my question is, are we going to be able to make it through the initiation into spiritual adulthood? If you just use the bees as an example, how many bees have to die before we realize how sacred they are? And can we actually navigate the period of time it takes for us to awaken to the bees? So if you take that same concept and say, we are the bees, how many of us are going to die before the few remaining wake up and start changing things? And that's a gamble in itself. So I know that's a sort of a long-winded way to talk about all this, but I'd like to ask you, what is the true nature of Earth from a spiritual perspective, and why are we here at this time?
Okay. Part of our problem is that we've got a perfect storm between religious misconceptions about the Earth, and technological misconceptions about the Earth. So at the very beginning of the Hebrew scriptures, for instance, you have God, having created everything, gives humanity radha over nature. The Hebrew word that's used is radha. And radha has 3 different meanings. It means to exploit, to control, or to be responsible for. And we've taken it in the first 2 ways, that we think that Earth is just a resource for us, to be exploited and dominated and controlled, whereas in fact it was our responsibility. So it's interesting when God invites Adam and Eve to name all the animals with whom they're shared in the Garden of Eden. We don't understand. We think naming is just hanging an identity tag on something, like you do with like cows. You put a tag on their ear. number 675.
Yeah.
Whereas you look, the Maasai warriors know the name of every single, cow they have. By name, every single one of them. And so this idea that when we were asked to name the animals, that we were just a kind of, I'm going to call this one an elephant, and let me call this one a kind of a snake, and I call that one a hippo. That's not what it was. To know somebody's name, kind of in the Hebrew kind of mysticism, was to be in relationship with their essence. And that's why God refuses to divulge his name. In the great story at the burning bush, when Moses says to God, God wants him to go back into Egypt to set the Israelites free. And this God has been missing in action for 430 years at this stage. And Moses says, I go back and tell them, God sent me back to set you free. And they said to me, what God are you talking about? Because they were polytheists. What will I say? What is your name?
Yes.
And God says in Hebrew, Ehia, Ashir, Ehia, which is always mistranslated. It's mistranslated as I am who I am. But there's no present tense of the verb to be in Hebrew. There's a present tense of all the other verbs, and there are all the other tenses of the verb to be, but you cannot say I am in Hebrew. And the same thing in Swahili. You have to get around to what's called predication without a verb. And so if I want to say, for instance, in Kalenjin language, I am an elder of the tribe. I say Aboyot, which means me, elder, but there's no present tense of the verb to be. And so what God actually said was, I will be who I will be, was a future tense. So in other words, God refuses to divulge his name, because to have somebody's name is to be in a power position over them.
Right.
And so when God asked Adam to name the animals, he wanted them to be in relationship with each other, not have power over, not to dominate, not to see them as kind of just resources. So that's the first problem, that religion. Yeah.
When you get a second, I want to ask you something or share something.
Yeah. So for me, that's the religious problem we have, that we operated on a misconception of radha, which was to be have responsibility for rather than to dominate or despoil or exploit. And the second one then is what technology did. So it's like an extraordinary storm, the perfect storm. You've got religion, in some senses, controlling nature, and you've got technology controlling nature. And so you're absolutely right. We got chemtrails in our skies. We got plastics in our rivers. We got pollution in our streams. We got sprays on our crops. We're killing our bees. We're killing our singing birds. And so technology is kind of accelerating what religion started. And so we have to go back again to the notion of we're sharing the planet intentionally as God meant it to be, because each species is performing a task on behalf of Gaia. And when we abandon that task, and either through technology or kind of fundamentalist religion, that we see the planet itself not as our mother, but rather as kind of just a mining heap to be kind of exploited. So we have to deal with those two pieces.
Hi, everybody. I know that you're all aware of the importance of vitamin C. There's a mountain of research on it, but not all C is created equally. I love Paleo Valley's Essential C complex because it is the real deal, bioavailable. And I wanted you to hear right from Autumn Smith, founder of Paleo Valley, why their Essential C complex is so unique and something you definitely want for your family and your children. Autumn, tell us about your Essential C complex.
Well, I was shocked to learn as a holistic nutritionist that over 90% of the vitamin C on the market is derived from genetically modified corn, and then it's processed with highly volatile acids. And so I knew I had to find a better way to get all of the powerful benefits of vitamin C. So what I did was I dove into the research, and I found the 3 most vitamin C rich superfoods on the planet. That's unripe acerola cherry and camu camu and amla berry. And then I just packed them into capsules. And the benefits are amazing because you're not only getting vitamin C, but all of the other wonderful benefits that come from these amazing superfoods.
To get your Paleo Valley Essential C to help support a healthy immune system and get 15% off, go to paleovalley.com/Chek15. That's paleovalley.com/CHEK15 for a 15% savings.
Yeah, boy, I'll tell you what, you've uncapped a lot in me that I'd like to talk about, but I'll try to curtail it because it could be a long discussion. But, I think when you talked about, instead of a tag in the cow's ear, naming each cow and basically in having a relationship with it. And it's interesting because Angie and the kids and Penny and sometimes me name all the farm animals. Every chicken we have, I think there's 20 plus. Angie and Penny and the kids know every one of them, and they relate to them. They have to nurse them now and then and help them heal from various things. They know the name. We got 15, I think 16 goats now. They know every one of them. Wow. And each one has a personality.
Yes.
And I think what you're describing is the difference between naming a thing and calling it a tree and just seeing it as an object, yes, like a stone or a car, or this is a pen, and naming our children. Most people that I know, when they name their children, they know they're naming the soul for its life journey. Some of us know that there's a lot of power in a name, right? There's a real lot of power in a name. And then of course you have the process of spiritual initiation where gurus will give you a new name to symbolize the end of the unconscious life, ego-driven life, to the beginning of your spiritual life. Like, Osho, Sri Bhagwan Rajneesh became Osho. Right. And then, many other people like that. I mean, it's a very common, how common these naming ceremonies are. But the point is that, like, if my children are in the room and I say Mana, Zoe knows I'm talking to Mana. Everyone in the room knows I'm talking to Mana. Mm-hmm. And we all have a sense of the essence of Mana. If we say Cosmo, we know we're talking about our male goat named Cosmo, and we know immediately the name brings you into resonance with the essence of that being. Mm-hmm. And so this brings up another thing is that, many, if not most native tribes, I would say, were polytheistic, wouldn't you?
Yes. Yeah. Well, in this sense that, when you try to kind of wrestle with God, part of the problem is we can't say anything about God's essential, essence, about the kind of it's totally ineffable, it's transcendent. And so the only way we can kind of interact with God is somehow through God's immanence. Mm-hmm. And so God will appear in whatever guise is appropriate. And so different religions have tried to kind of pigeonhole it and say there's a creative aspect of God we call the Father, and then there's a kind of redeeming aspect of God we call the Son, and there's the kind of the sustaining aspect that we call the Spirit. Or in Hinduism we'll have Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Mm-hmm. Or in Buddhism we'll have Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dharmam Saranam Gacchami, Sangam Saranam Gacchami, so that we try to break God up into the ways in which we experience God. But they're not descriptors of who God is. They're only descriptors of how we experience God. And we must never kind of confound the experience of God with the essence itself. Mm-hmm. So we have to be very, very humble in realizing this is a way in which I've experienced the divine. Now, the problem was in the Christian dispensation that the words that the Greek fathers used when they were wrestling with the notion of Jesus, they used the word prosopon. And they said there are 3 prosopons in the divine. And prosopon was the Greek word for a mask. So when an actor came on stage, he would wear a mask to kind of alert the audience as to what kind of a character he's going to portray. Mm-hmm. So if he came on stage with a mask that looked like this, it would be a comedy. If it was like this, it's going to be a tragedy. So the audience knew immediately what kind of a character to expect. So that's the word that the Greeks were using for God, prosopon. Mm-hmm. When it got translated into Latin by the Latin Church, they used the word persona. Yes. So you have a mask with holes in it for the eyes and a hole here. So a persona, you're sounding out through it. Mm-hmm. So persona, and that then became person, and that became personality. And now we're mistaking the mask that God is wearing for who God is in herself. Right. And that's the problem. And so we have to realize that what appears to be kind of polytheism, many, many gods, is actually just many ways in which, let's say, the Hindu people were experiencing the divine. And we put a kind of Western understanding that they were polytheists. I don't think they really were. I think they were just enumerating particular facets of their experiences of the divine. And we misinterpret this as their belief that there were a whole bunch of competing divinities up there somewhere, kind of warring among themselves.
Yeah, and one of the things that I came into through contemplative meditation of when Moses said to the burning bush, "Who are you?" and God said, now in some book of the versions of the Bible, I've got about 15 Bibles in my library because I like to see how verses change and so on and so forth. I'm sure you've plenty of your own. In one of the verses, it might be King James, it was translated as "I am that I am."
Yes.
And so when I meditated on that contemplatively, I thought, with just a slight change of pronunciation or punctuation, it could be "I am that I am," which would be like pointing to the tree, "I am that," pointing to the cow, "I am that," pointing to the mountain, "I am that," I am, and there's the immanence of God. Like I'm the mystery is how the bush caught on fire, and if I remember right, it wasn't burned afterwards; it was still there. That would point to the essence, right? That's because you can't, that's a magic beyond our conception. Nobody I know of can light a bush on fire and have it burn, but not burn.
And so just add to that one piece, Paul, is that, that there's this great Hindu saying, then tat tvamasi, thou art that.
Yeah.
And so the understanding that when you actually see the essence of anything, you see God. And so this is kind of Jesus' famous statement when he's, walking along and he sees lilies and he says, "Look at the lilies of the field. They don't spin or weave or gather into gardens. And yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his royal finery looked as good as one of these. Why are you afraid?" So what he's saying is, if you really see a lily, you see everything. Thich Nhat Hanh would say, a flower consists completely of non-flower elements.
Yes, I've studied that.
Rain and the soil and everything contains everything. So it's not where we look that's important. It's how we look. Because if you know how to look, it doesn't matter where you look, you'll see everything. And if you don't know how to look, it doesn't matter a damn where you look, you never see anything. So it's the altered state of consciousness that allows us to be in relationship with the essence. And that is what naming the animals is about then. You're recognizing the essence of the animal and you're pronouncing it to establish the connection. So it's not about just handing a tag on a cow's ear.
Yeah, a couple of things come up for me. One, the same essence of God that's ineffable has ultimately got to be the same in us because we are that. Like, the soul consciousness within the spirit, those things we can certainly have a relationship with. But, I've spent countless hours of my life working with my soul and my spirit and working back. And my Kidra, my guiding spirit and soul says, and I say, well, what are you ultimately? How are you different from God? And the answer that I was given is, your sense of who you are is no different than a wave on the ocean. Mm-hmm. I am the self, which is the emergence of a wave that is perceptible to you as your own experience. But ultimately, I emerge from the ocean. So there is no difference between God and its waves. And that's once you get past that relationship with your own spirit and soul, to go deeper, you basically go into, whatever word you want to use, Tao, the unnameable. The experiences that I've had in there are, very shocking because it's really, really hard to deal. Like the sense of self is like a sugar cube, and when you merge into God, the sugar cube begins to dissolve very rapidly, and it's a very, very profound and intense experience. And once the sugar cube gone, there's nobody there to know anything. So even if God said, "Here I am, this is my essence," there would be no you there. And so my only point I'm making is, I think one of the problems that we have in the world is that we forget that the essence of every soul, even the people that may trigger us, be it Bill Gates or whoever, is actually the same being. Just like there's many waves on the ocean on a given day. But, just because one of them flipped your boat over, it doesn't mean it's less God than the wave that tipped your boat right side up. And
so for me, then it's a question of that, And there's a great statement in John's Gospel at the beginning of it, where he says, in the beginning was the Word, Logos, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were created by him, and without him was made nothing that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of man, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Now, Christians think that this was a one-off, that there's only one occasion in which God, kind of revealed, or kind of articulated herself as a human being. I would say that everything that exists is a word of God made flesh. Every bunny rabbit, every oak tree, every human being is a word of God made flesh. It's just a different configuration, but there is nothing which is not God. So we're all holographic fractals of source. And the question then becomes, can I arrive at the realization that I am that pomasi, that I am the divine, and not the ego in me, but the essence of myself, and that therefore if it's true of me, it's true of everything else. I remember a powerful vision I had many, many years ago, where I saw Gaia, the planet, the being, standing in front of God. So for me, Gaia is a Mahatma, a great soul, standing in front of God and saying, send me to that third rock from the sun in that solar system, and I will breathe life on it until I throw up a species which is capable of recognizing its own divinity, and ipso facto, the divinity of every other species with which it shares the planet. And that was Gaia's, mission, to breathe life. And she's been at it now for 3.7 billion years, and it's possible that we are kind of the species who are meant to kind of make the breakthrough, to realize that indeed we are the divine, but so is everybody else, and so is everything else. Mm-hmm. So it'll radically change our relationships as human beings with each other and as human beings vis-a-vis nature. But we haven't got that piece. We haven't understood it yet. And the question is, will we arrive at that place where we actually are able to say namaste? The divine in me recognizes and honors the divine in you. And that I can say this to the oak tree outside my window, or the bunny rabbit hopping across my front yard, or my enemies in the world. Can I see it in them? And that for me is, that's what's going to change everything.
I believe so. Yeah. It's just we're racing the clock, I've quoted this multiple times, but it's relevant now. Steiner said, man will continue to invent technologies outside of himself until he either destroys the world or realizes everything he's created is an inferior copy of the technology within himself. The question is, which will come first?
Yes.
And what this, for me, kind of harkens back to is when you look at the story of Adam and Eve eating the apple, and then the punishment is you will toil on the thorns for generations and generations to come. And then you know better than anybody that there's a deep disdain of the body and a resent for being on the earth, and the concept that we're fallen sinners. And so many people speak of the primordial wound that humans are wounded, and they keep enacting their trauma. And it seems to me, Sean, that one of the biggest traumas that we have and still are grappling with, and is the very reason I love talking to you and deep people like you, is that if you think of the number of people in the world that were raised as children and had these ideas put into their head from even in the womb, while mommy's sitting in church being told this kind of stuff, we actually have now billions of people on the planet that have a conscious or unconscious belief that they're fallen, that they're sinners, that, there's something wrong with them, that that comes with guilt and shame. It comes with a lot of confused emotions. It comes with fear of God. It comes with programmed resent toward the body, programmed resent toward the earth. It's like a prison yard, and we're just waiting to get out of here. It leads to a lot of neurosis and within oneself, because the people don't know how to channel this pain and confusion. And I think, you'd think after all these years, we would have more of an openness to a deeper understanding of Scripture. And I'm sure you're familiar with Neil Douglas Klotz's book. Is it The Cosmic Christ?
No, The Cosmic Christ, I think, was Matt Fox, but Neil Douglas Klotz did translations from the Aramaic.
Right.
Of many of the prayers.
And so there's an example of a book I read when it first came out, and he has the prayers of Jesus in Aramaic on a CD you could listen to, which is beautiful. But he shows you, because Aramaic only has 14 letters in their alphabet?
22 probably. All of the kind of the Semitic languages have 22 characters. Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic. So English extended to 26. Irish only has 20. The Hindus have 52. So it depends on the culture. But I think all the Semitic languages have 22 syllables.
Okay.
Symbols.
I think if you look in his book, though, it's less than 20, I'm sure, because I can almost guarantee you it's either 14 or 16. But the point is, what he shows in the book is that there's often up to four ways to translate each of the words attributed to Jesus. And he shows that the church took them probably the least accurate and the most likely to control people. Mm-hmm. And so I guess at some point we have to sort of break through the passivity and the childlike adherence to authority figures and do our own due diligence, which can either come by researching the scriptures, because this information is readily available now, or it can come by a deeper, more intimate relationship with your own spirit and your own soul. But then there's a lack of people that even ever talk about that or know how to do it. I mean, I've told you, I think, the story. I've got like at least 130 books on the soul in my library, and only 2 of them mention anything at all about how to make contact with your soul. And even Michael Singer's famous book sold millions, not one word in there about how to contact and relate to your soul directly. And I think that's, if we work with our own spirit and our own soul directly, the only thing we've got to do to make sure that that's working well is do our own shadow work and inner healing, so that we're not talking to complexes and soul fragments or, pieces of the wounded child or whatever. And that takes time, admittedly, to work through. And that's why I teach this in Spirit Gym. But then we can actually have our own intimate relationship. And we can always tell. People ask me all the time, Paul, how do I know if I'm talking to my soul or something else? And I say, well, the advice your soul will give you will always be based in love. It'll always be something that makes you more whole. It will never mislead you, because if it does, it's misleading itself, limits its own ability for its own evolution, because that's why you're here. Your soul is inside of you, evolving with you. It's not, how would you put it? It's not, it's like the rainbow. Aristotle says the soul is to the body like vision is to the eye. Well, if there's no eye, there's no vision. So in other words, the soul needs the body just like a head. You have to have a heads and a tails on a coin, or there's no currency to it,
Protein is an essential part of everyday life, but where you get your protein from and when you consume it can make a huge difference. Organifi's Complete Protein makes it easy for you to get high-quality, clean protein into your meals. Start your day with a breakfast shake, and you'll find the ingredients in Organifi's Complete Protein work together to help reduce cravings all day, as well as providing organic vitamins and minerals. People often assume that if something is organic, it's also free from pesticides and residues. Sadly, that isn't always true. Even in the cleanest of conditions, contamination is still possible. Although Organifi is not required to test for things like glyphosate residue and other chemicals that can affect your health, they take the extra step and spend the extra money to thoroughly test their protein before it goes out the door and into your home. Organifi's Complete Protein is a unique combination of 3 complex plant-based proteins and other organic whole foods, making it a great choice for those who struggle with bloating or indigestion from dairy or whey protein powders. It comes in 2 great flavors, chocolate or vanilla, and is easy to mix up on its own or add some fruit, nuts, and seeds to make a delicious smoothie. My personal favorite is blending the vanilla with bananas and almond butter. To try Organifi's Complete Protein and save 20%, go to Organifi.com/Chek20 and use the promo code Chek20. That's Organifi.com/Chek20 and use Chek20 for a 20% discount.
But anyhow, I hope I'm making sense to you. Feel free to share your thoughts.
Maybe build on that a bit. So I agree with you that spirituality has been reduced to religion, and religion very often has been reduced to morality, and morality has been reduced to sexuality. And so that's been kind of the journey of fundamentalist religions in all stripes and shapes. Now, the other side of we're caught in a pincer movement. So there's a whole bunch of people, and that's how they've been trained and brought up, and that's their mindset. The other side of it is a total materialism that says we can save you from that fundamentalist, paranoid God, because their God doesn't exist at all. There is no soul. There's just material. And so we're going to give you the technology that it makes life easier for you. So we're caught now in a pincer movement between fundamentalist religion that doesn't understand the soul, and a totally godless materialistic scientism that doesn't even believe that virtue exists. We don't have even free will. And so the crucible in which we find ourselves at this stage in world history is to kind of reconnect with a deep mystical spirituality, not a fundamentalist religion, and certainly not a kind of an Ahrimanic technology, right. A kind of a soulless artificial intelligence model of the future. And that's right. It's navigating that very narrow path between those two pieces, between ascending religions that think, the world is sick, get out of here as fast as you can, and descending religions which just totally are sybaritic and hedonistic, and claim that any self-discipline whatsoever is a waste of good time. And so navigating that piece and realizing that we volunteer to be here now. That, as bite-sized pieces of God, we wanted to allow God the experience of different dimensions of reality, all the ways from like the seraphim at the very top, right down to three-dimensional human beings at the bottom. But we did it, we volunteered to be here now in order to try to see what would it be like to remember who we really are, when we're operating this with tiny little laptop, where we have to invent time to kind of grok the gestalt.
Right.
And so in some senses, what we're going through now is part of what we signed up for. So we have to embrace it in the sense that this has been the test that awakens us to our inner divinity. And so without the test, we wouldn't have awoken. We'd just be sleeping. And so I'm holding this vision that we're here now by choice. And that I think that there's a third name. We talked about naming a while ago. There's a third name. I believe that as a soul is parachuting into incarnation, that the last thing it's told by Grandmother God is, firstly, we're reminded of our own personal history in previous incarnations, our strengths and our weaknesses, what we're capable of. We're given a very, very quick synopsis of the past life histories of every single human being we're going to encounter on the planet. So we know their track history. So we know what we're parachuting into. We know the culture, the time, and the issues. And then the last thing we're given is Grandmother God sings our secret, sacred name to us, because every single one of us has a secret, sacred, divine name. And when you know what that name is, you awaken to your mission. And so for me, that's the most important of all the names, the one that God whispered to us before we came in. And if I can remember what that was, and it's not going to be something like Bob or Jim or Michael or whatever. It may be a piece of music. It may be kind of the look in a newborn baby's eye that kind of alerts me to it and reminds me what it was. But once you come in contact with that inner name, then you know who you are, you know who everybody else is, and you know what your purpose is.
Yes. Two things come to my mind as you share that there, which I really love what you shared. It's really important, and it's clarifying on many levels for a lot of people, I'm sure. I know when Eve ate from God said, don't eat from the apple of the tree. Somewhere it was said, you will become as gods, or maybe the snake said that.
Yeah,
if you
the snake said that,
yeah. And so, when we look at what we're doing, we've got nuclear weapons, we've got very dangerous telephones and advanced technologies and very dangerous chemistry and very dangerous manipulation of reality with trickery that goes right to the money system we're in, to religion, to, it's like, so the point is like, we are sort of like children that have been given way too much power for our depth of understanding and moral capacity. And so it's almost like we are going through an initiation into what happens when you are given godlike powers and you have to learn responsibility for them. And, when I was a paratrooper in training, a soldier in training, the drill sergeants were always quite nervous when we were at the firing range. And, they said several drill sergeants have been killed by soldiers in training who were waving weapons around and forgot that they were loaded and didn't have the safety on. So they're like, they get a little nervous around you, and they get even more nervous. They said the ones that scare us the most are the John Waynes that grew up with firearms on farms because they think they know what they're doing, and so they got bad habits. But, another perspective I want to put on the table, because as I've spent a lot of time studying alchemy, and I love alchemy. I think it just gets rid of all the religious baggage and gets right to some very, very core issues. But one of the key tenets of alchemy is that God consciousness or spirit gets entangled or trapped in matter in the process of its own creation or manifestation or the embodiment of God as immanence. And then the process of alchemy is to purify the self and to extract the spirit, the consciousness out of matter so that ultimately the body is a cocoon that we butterfly our way out of through conscious practice. And if you look at quantum physics, it shows that matter is really just light entangled within itself, moving at just under the speed of light, and it creates the illusion of solidity, as you know very well. So it seems to me like there's a book by William Dennis Huck called The Absolute Idiot's Guide to Alchemy, which is a really great book. I mean, it's like a real nice comprehensive break. It was one of my first books I studied on alchemy because, as you know, alchemy can be very coded and complex. So I really devoted myself to this study of this, 250-page book. And one of the descriptions in there is of the dragon. And in alchemy, they say the dragon is everywhere. It's in everything. It's in the trees. It's the bark of the trees. It's the mountains. It's the rivers. It's the streams. And this goes on long enough. It's saying the dragon symbolizes everything. Well, one of the interpretations for dragon as a symbol is spirit. And so it seems to me that we're in this process of slowly awakening to the spirit of ourselves and matter and the spirit in matter, which is, very much a pagan way of relating that the tree is a spirit. It's not just a pile of wood. It's certainly not a materialistic way to see things. But I think that, strangely enough, that we're really just lacking good alchemy instructors to show us how to recognize the spirit and matter. And people like you and I that can see water spirits or nature spirits or fairies or elementals, there's no question to us that spirit is in matter. And there's no question that as we evolve, we liberate that spirit and become less and less bound by matter and bound by material possessions, etc. So I think if we looked at the world from an alchemical perspective, it seems like there's two things happening at once. Some of us are waking up to the fact that we are spiritual beings in material bodies, and then they're serving their function, like you call them an avatar. But some of us, and this is what Steiner said, the Ahrimanic deception is that it'll take us so deep into matter, we will never forget that we are not matter. And that's ultimately why Ahriman's incarnating, is to give us the experience of materialism to such a deep and profound level that we will never forget that we are not matter. What are your thoughts on the worldview of us moving through an alchemical process?
I think it's really important. So the temptation is either to kind of merge completely and be seduced totally by the physical, and go to the Ahrimanic version, into a technological version of that. And the other one is to eschew it completely and deny it, like Gnosticism will do. So the difference between ascending religions and descending religions.
So you got Lucifer versus Ahriman.
Ahriman, exactly. And the question is, it's about the integration of the two, not the abandonment of anyone or the kind of the seduction by one over the other. And so it's about the integration of the two, because in some senses, the darkness is alerting us to the fact, that we volunteered to kind of take a three-dimensional version of reality and see if we could still remember that we were divine, but to recognize the prison itself as divine, not just kind of escape from the prison, that there's nothing in the planet which is evil in the sense that it's not part of our agreement with God. Can you go into this kind of a dimension and recognize the divine in that dimension? And ipso facto recognize the divine in yourself in that dimension. So I had this great vision many, many years ago, and for some reason, I just remembered it yesterday, and I sketched it out. And in this vision, I saw the sun, beautiful sun shining beautifully, and the light is meeting this big, big room. And there are no windows or doors in this room. It's totally sealed. But there's, in one wall, there's a little opening, like a little portal. And so the sunlight is shining through that portal, and it comes inside, and it meets a prism. And the prism refracts it into 7 different colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, which is projected onto a screen at the other wall. And the message I was given was that, in some sense, the sun represents God. The burst of sunlight coming from God represents love, that God kind of emanates love completely. The wall represents kind of the division or the borderland between the transcendence of God and the immanence of God. And the whole represents it's a portal. It represents the Holy Spirit. That's the conduit for that love of God to enter into incarnation. When it comes inside the whole, it's an individual splink of light, which is the individual soul. And then the soul meets the prism of incarnation, and it recognizes the 7 different levels of body. There's the physical, the etheric, the astral, the mental, the psychic, and then back to God itself. And so it was like a visual of this entire process for which we volunteered. We volunteered to be rays of sunlight that would penetrate, and come from the kind of the transcendence to the immanence, to the mediation of the Holy Spirit, becoming unique souls, encounter incarnation and split into these 7 levels, and recognize that at every single level we are divine, and to be able to recognize that level, those levels in others. Because I think that the planet itself, has the same levels of body. So I talk about, the first level of Gaia is the physiosphere, which is studied by physics. The second level of the body, I call it the womb of the planet, and it is the atmosphere. The third level of the body is the biosphere. Now we got flora and fauna emerging from the atmosphere, and now we're in the stage in between biosphere and noosphere. Tyler Desjardins talked about this sheath of consciousness that surrounds the planet, and we're halfway between biosphere and noosphere, which is really, really dangerous, because we now have the technology to totally destroy the physiosphere itself, and therefore the biosphere with it. But there are stages beyond that for me. The next stage, I call it the animasphere, anima as in soul.
Animation.
So animation, the soul of the planet. And then the sheath above that, I call it the pneumosphere, pneuma as in spirit. And then finally the cosmosphere, or God. So the planet itself is keeping pace with us. As we're moving ourselves from identification with our physiology to the kind of the elan vital of the etheric body, to the astral, the emotional level of the body, to the mental level, the archetypal level, to the psychic abilities. As we're making those shifts as individuals, the planet itself, is pacing us. And so the question would be then as, what happens if there were to be a nuclear holocaust, for instance? Even if the physical planet itself were to disintegrate under some kind of, an explosion, what would happen? What would happen simply is that Gaia has been liberated from its physical sheath and is now operating at the others, and it's a home to all human beings who are also operating at this higher level. So we're always going to find a frequency that resonates with us. It's not a question of being separated into sheep and goats or heaven and hell. It's that we're naturally attracted to the frequencies that we kind of emanate ourselves. And so there'll always be a home for us. There'll always be a Gaia for us. Depending on the frequency with which the individual soul is operating, it will immediately gravitate towards that.
I'm super excited to let you guys know that I found an amazing energy product. I had previously fell in love with Update, but my buddy Aubrey, who is here with me right now, came to me and said, Paul, I've got something I think you'll like even better than Update. And I was suspicious because it's pretty hard to beat it. So I waited for the right day when I felt like I could really use a little energy boost, and I tried it, and I was absolutely blown away. Not only did it give me a beautiful, smooth lift, but I felt like a sense of holism, integration, like I had been doing Tai Chi. It flowered. It was like the sun shining. And I thought, wow, this is actually pretty damn good, and it's worth me telling people about. So I've got Aubrey here to tell us a little bit more specifics about his amazing new Correct Energy product. So Aubrey, tell us a little more about it. It's a phenomenal product. I'm very impressed.
Well, thank you so much. Honestly, I wouldn't have started another supplement company after Onnit if we weren't able to make this product. This product actually birthed the company.
Oh, great.
It was so good and so powerful and so important, I felt like. And it was like, we have to launch this product. We have to build a company to allow this to be the core. And like you said, the main ingredient is the same as it is in Update, which is the Infinity, that paraxanthine, which is a caffeine metabolite. So it's something that your body naturally breaks caffeine down into in the body.
Yes.
They were able to isolate that. And it really feels like in some ways, like the spirit of caffeine. Like
yes.
It distilled the very essence of caffeine itself. All of the things that we wish caffeine would do and all the things we wish caffeine wouldn't do. It captures that in a really unique way.
And none of the buzz that I get from caffeine, it's just smooth. It's really amazing, smooth, uplifting energy. And I don't feel any hangover or letdown from it at all. It's just really just like a little elevator ride up to a higher level of creativity and self-expression.
Yeah, and that's one of the beautiful parts about it. It feels both completely subtle and absolutely powerful. Like you'll take it, may even forget that you took it, but then realize you just had the best 6 hours, that you've had in a long time. And I think it's a combination of that paraxanthine core. The Infinity is the branded core, which is a scientific advancement, isolating this caffeine metabolite. Then we do what, we always do and surround it with the best plant extracts. So Mango indica, it helps support the dopamine pathway. It's actually from the mango. And then Alpinia galanga, we have a branded extract of that. And that was a real insight that we had. We looked at the different plant extracts that worked well with caffeine and made the bet that those things that worked well with caffeine would work well with the caffeine metabolite. So both of these different herbal extracts actually inhibit the breakdown of dopamine in the body and then support actually what caffeine would do. So we have these natural plant extracts, including quercetin, decaf green coffee, decaf green tea. So we treated this like there's a natural intelligence to caffeine. We've isolated the intelligence of what the body does with caffeine and then surrounded it with the herbs and different compounds to give this kind of holistic formula that I really believe it's the best energy product that exists
out there. I wouldn't be here with you. I don't sell or offer anything that I don't fully trust and use myself and wouldn't give to my own family. So I'm so grateful that you created this and shared it with me. So for those of you that want to give energy a try, go to Correct Life. That's KORRECT life.com/Spirit Gym and get 15% off on your first order. Aubrey, thank you again.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I've often envisioned the earth as a cocoon, and that just as the caterpillar goes through larva, was it larva, pupa? There's 4 stages. The fourth is the transformation into the butterfly. First the larva, then the caterpillar, then the cocoon, then the butterflies, the transcendent stage, which is when the imaginal cells turn on, when the caterpillar dissolves in the cocoon and becomes something completely different. And so I've often had visions that the earth is actually a large cocoon and that we are all going from the larva to the caterpillar and I think, you might have a different view, but I think we're actually coming into a liquidation of the constant eating, right? Because we're just eating the earth up. That's what caterpillars do. They just eat and eat and eat, and they can wipe a garden out in no time, as you know. And then they literally liquefy, and the imaginal cells turn on, and out comes the butterfly. So if you look at that, at what we're doing and how we're so caterpillar-like, if we don't go into the cocoon state and activate our imaginal cells, then we won't make it to the butterfly, because we'll kill the very environment that creates the cocoon. So it almost seems like all the destruction and all the chaos is potentially something we're bringing on unconsciously to force us to activate our imaginal selves, because we're going to get to a point where we realize, okay, we're at the end of an alley here, and there's no out. We can't go back, because we've eaten it all up. We've killed it all. We've burned it all. We've poisoned it all. We've got no choice but to meditate together and activate our imaginal cells and emerge as the butterfly. I personally feel that if a nuclear holocaust was to wipe the planet out, there would still be a huge percentage of souls that haven't evolved enough to they would have to reincarnate into another cocoon planet, because they don't have the awakening to fly in the next dimension up. They don't have wings yet. What are your thoughts from that kind of perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. We're always going to be attracted to the frequency at which we resonate. And that's not any judgment, it's not the good guys and the bad guys. It's the kind of the stage of evolution of the soul. And every soul is going to take as many iterations and many incarnations on as many different planets as it needs, until finally it realizes that the only thing that's real is love. And so I totally agree with you there. And the interesting thing to me is that, in the process of the caterpillar becoming a butterfly and kind of going into goo, and then the imaginal cells taking over, there's nothing gained and there's nothing lost. There's just the reconfiguration of the existing pieces. It's like Ilya-Prigogine dissipative structures.
Yes.
Everything that's there is necessary, and everything that's necessary is there. And that's the question. It's only, how do you reconfigure the elements in order to create the butterfly where there had been only a caterpillar? And that's very, very true for the times in which we live. All of the elements are there, and all of the elements are necessary. The question is, do we have the perspicacity to arrange the pieces in a different configuration? And that's the whole notion of Shiva in the Hindu Trinity. Shiva is the destroyer, but not the person who just lays waste, but the person who disassembles the existing configuration and reorganizes them, so there's a jump in complexity. And so for me, that's the times in which we live. There seem to be scary times, but they're necessary in the sense that only these kinds of crises will awaken enough people so that we can make this jump as a species. At least anybody who's awake enough to make the jump, and the others will pace themselves differently. But I don't believe that any soul is ever lost, because every soul is simply a holographic fractal of source, and they'll all be gathered back into the ocean. To use your own example of the wave, all of the waves go back to the ocean. No wave is stranded on the beach for eternity. Washes up onto the beach, deposits some kind of debris, and then withdraws back into the ocean again.
Yeah, that leads beautifully to my next point of dialogue here. From my perspective, God is unconditional love, and God is mirror-like. For example, if you had no body and you stood in front of a mirror, you wouldn't see anything, right? So the matter of God is what is necessary for God to embody and see itself, because it is transcendent to the mirror. It's the glass that you see through, but it's the reflective side of the mirror that is bouncing the light back at you, that's emanating from the matter of your body. So to me, the whole universe or multiverse is what God sees in, of, and as itself in its own introspection. And just like you and I look in the mirror and see ourselves and say, hey, how you doing? Cool, right? Because God has nothing other to look at but itself. The mirror-like quality of God is that it's looking into itself, but it's manifesting form to say, I am. And that, in my spirit gym, that's the principle of one, which is being, right? Something has to be. So my question that I'd like to pose to you is, what do you feel is being mirrored back to us about the authentic nature of God and ourselves in the events of the world today, because a lot of people, are quick to say, oh, this is evil, that's evil. And of course, then you end up with two gods, which is a real conundrum. And all the dualistic religions, even Gnosticism's heavily loaded with dualism, and it doesn't seem to be able to transcend beyond the dualistic perception of Aramuzda Ahriman, or God and the devil, or whatever. So if you take this sort of concept of the divine mirror, the question is, what do you feel is being mirrored back to us about the authentic nature of God and ourselves in the events of the world today that we're all going through?
So I want to pick up on that beautiful kind of image of, no pun intended, of a mirror, because I don't just see mirror as something that reflects back to me who I am. I think there are gradations, there are mirrors that shows me whom I could become. Mm-hmm. So I'm not just looking at Sean, on the 12th of June, 2025. I'm looking into a mirror that says, what could he be like? Not just my physical being. Mm-hmm. What could he be like in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 3 incarnations down the road, or whatever? And so it's a mirror of possibilities, not just a mirror of actualities. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the only way God can experience, is by creating Hebrew. There's a great phrase in the Kabbalah that talks about netzotzot, sparks of the divine, that God self-fractures into all these sparks in order to generate experiences. Because as you say rightly, if there is only God, then no experiences are possible. No relationship is possible. And without relationship, there can't be experience. And so in some senses, God kind of decides to kind of self-fracture into these myriad of souls. And then these souls go out, to generate experiences. But it's unconditional in the sense that there are no ifs and buts. God doesn't say you can do X, but you can't do Y.
Right.
There are no limits on free will. Whatever you choose to do, just deal with the consequences. Karma is just working with the consequences of present choices. And there are no limits to creativity. So unconditional for me means these things. It means no ifs and buts. It means no limits on free will. And it means no limits on creativity. And now God said, go with my blessing. See what you can create.
Yes.
And then see how you can learn from what you've created and how I can learn. Because in some senses, the immanence of God, is in process. It's not a fixed entity, yeah? And so it's growing. And it's growing by the experiences of all its creatures. So once we realize that unconditional literally means there aren't conditions. There's no ifs and buts. You can do this, but you can't do that. And if you do this, here's kind of how I'm going to be pissed. Or if you do that, I'm going to be happy. And there are no limits on free will. Once we choose the game, the image I use sometimes is like, if I decide to become an athlete and I want to know, should I play soccer, American football, Irish hurling, baseball, which game do I want to play?
I suggest you stick with soccer, not football.
Yeah, right. The thing is, you can choose any game you want.
Yeah.
Once you choose a game, you agree to abide by the rules of the game. So in soccer, you can't handle the ball unless you're the goalkeeper. If you decide to play baseball, the ball is about this size. You decide to play, football, it's a totally different shape. There are different numbers of people on the field. There are different rules of engagement. So you're free to choose any game you want. But once you decide on a game, then you agree to abide by the rules of the game. So that's where people get free will misunderstood. They think, free will is the ability to control the outcome. You have no control over the outcome. You control over the input, what you decide to put in.
Yes.
But you have no control over the output because there are 8 billion other people also making inputs at the same time.
Yeah.
And so we have to realize that we have free will, but the free will was in the choice of the game, the choice of the incarnation. But then we agree to abide by the rules of incarnation. And within that, there's no limits to our creativity. Whatever we can dream up, we can create and then live with the consequences of our creation.
When Paul started presenting his Flatten Your Abs Forever seminar at events over 20 years ago, I still remember how shocked people were to learn that flat abs had more to do with posture, breathing, and digestion than endless crunches and ab exercises. The response was amazing, and I typically had people coming up to me after a presentation and saying, "I've been training for years, but no one ever explained the body like this." It's moments like this that show how powerful the Chek approach is. When you start looking at the body as one complete system, everything changes. Now, the Chek Institute has launched an all-new version of Flatten Your Abs Forever, a complete video program that walks you step by step through the process of building strong, flat, and functional abs the right way. It uses Paul's proven system that's helped thousands of people transform their health from the inside out. And right now, you can claim the brand new Flatten Your Abs Forever bundle for free when you sign up at chek.group/flat abs. You can also find this link in the show notes. Along with the new video program, you'll also get 3 incredible bonuses from Paul and the Chek Institute. The Last 4 Doctors You'll Ever Need ebook, a clear, practical guide to achieving lasting health. The Big Bang Workout, a time-saving routine packed with Paul's most effective exercises. And the Gut Health Reset video, your step-by-step plan to support healthy digestion and flatten your midsection naturally. That's a value of $99, and those 3 bonuses are yours free when you sign up for the Flatten Your Abs Forever bundle. It's a limited time offer, so just head to chek.group/flat abs and claim yours today. I've seen firsthand how this information can change lives. If you've been chasing results that never seem to last, this is where it starts, with real knowledge, a proven system, and the guidance of Paul and the Chek Institute.
Yes, and this concept of the game, I think, is really far more deep and profound than a lot of people realize, which is why I've read James Carson's book, Finite and Infinite Games, 3 times and probably listened to it on audio 3 or 4 times. And it's actually such a deep that every time I go through it again, I realize how much I missed. But I also recognize that as I'm growing myself spiritually, that I'm able to read the same passage or hear the same words, but I'm now it's now meaning something new and deeper to me. And I think one of the dangers that we have, and one of the dangers of being taught religion through memorization, is that we think we know it, we then push it aside and stop revisiting it with fresh eyes to see what's there. I give you an example. My senior instructor, Matthew Walden, who's a naturopathic physician and an osteopathic physician, and a very, very smart guy who's been with me for 28 years. Well, I kind of got a chuckle because one day he came to me, and he said, "Paul, I've just finished reading your book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, for the 5th time. And I'm shocked and also embarrassed at how much I learned the 5th time. And I'm your senior instructor." And I'm like, I started laughing because I said, yes, what I did is I tried to concentrate everything that I knew into a book that was readable for the public about what you need to understand as the absolute basics of how to take care of yourself. The problem is that most people have been raised and live so far from the core basics of these teachings that any one of them, just getting proper water into your body, is a big transition for them. So what you're experiencing is actually your own unveiling of your own evolution. And now that you have the water right, and you whatever basics you've got under your belt now, your mind's letting you see the parts that you haven't yet grappled with. And so my point is, there is an example of a man who's highly educated, multiple degrees, editor for the Journal of Bodywork and Movement Therapy for 20 plus years, written some of the most read articles ever, super smart guy, but he goes back and reads my most basic book 5 times. I think we've lost a lot of the spirit of learning because we think once we've memorized something that we know it. And I think that's one of the major problems. I know in the Middle East, I've seen multiple documentaries and heard from people from there that the children have to start memorizing the Quran, and they have to do it. And they often get very punished if they can't recite it until they have it completely memorized. But to memorize something is not to engage it. It is not to embody it as a process. It is to concretize it.
And so I think that's why Jesus chose to speak in parables.
Yes.
You can revisit a parable at multiple stages of your life and see new understandings, new abilities. So I think there are 3 ways of listening to any kind of a teacher. The first one is kind of understand him literally. and that's kind of left brain activity.
Mm-hmm.
The second way is symbolic, to listen with your right brain. And the third way is mystical.
Mm-hmm.
And that's to listen with your heart and your soul and your whole brain. But there are very few of us, who learn to listen mystically. We're looking for literal interpretation. So the ultimate is kind of materialistic science, when you're looking just at kind of stuff that can be measured, that's physical material, and that's the only reality. And they're totally missing the core essence. So I created a word many years ago called mythish. And for me, mythish is kind of is sacred wisdom, told in story form. And so wisdom for me is different from knowledge. Knowledge is just data generated by the sensorium and kind of processed by the brain, whereas wisdom is data which are generated by the soul and processed by the heart. And so sacred wisdom then can only be articulated in some kind of a story form. You can't do it philosophically or theologically or scientifically, because it's going to leak. It's like putting food into a refrigerator that's not plugged in. It's all going to spoil.
Yeah.
And so learning to listen mystically is so important. Otherwise, we're just, as you say, memorizing data, and memorizing perspectives and viewpoints rather than being engaged with the kind of the spirit of the matter.
For what I believe wisdom to be is not different than what you say, but slightly different nuance. I teach my students that wisdom is the synthesis of experience. You cannot have wisdom without experience. So no matter how many verses you can recite or books you can recite, if you have not put that into practice, you have not synthesized that knowledge or those ideas to see if they even work, or who they work for, or what is the best situation to or not to use them. And only through experience can you gain wisdom. And I think ultimately wisdom is what leaves with us when we die. I say to my students, all you can take with you when you die is what you've become. Mm-hmm. And ultimately the essence of that is the wisdom, because even if you've lived a life in prison, or, no matter what life you've lived, there is something that you've learned from it. And ultimately, I think that's what the soul wants to carry. I really believe that's what the stone is in alchemy, is the essence of what we've gained through life experience. And the reason I bring that up is because a lot of people think they're wise just because they can spout off verses and whatever, but you achieve wisdom without the hard-earned experience of being in the field, tilling it, working it. I used to be a mechanic and build race cars. And I'll give you an example of exactly what I'm talking about for everyone in the world that's listening to this, to make it really clear. When I used to have to change the spark plugs on a Ford Mustang with a V8 engine, some of them you have to actually undo the motor mount and lift the freaking block up so you can get a wrench to the spark plugs. And I'm like, who is the fucking idiot that engineered this fucking car? Because obviously they have no experience as a mechanic, because what should take 20 minutes to do turns out to be a 3.5 to 5 hour job, which makes every tune-up a very expensive process. And so there's an example where smarts does not have wisdom. Yeah. And the same thing with exercise equipment. I have a lot of knowledge on biomechanics, kinesiology, and all the related sciences. And I would be called in by equipment manufacturers to analyze their equipment and say, how could we improve this? And I'd be, a lot of it I'd used before. I'm like, first of all, you've built this stuff for the average male, which is 5'11". So you realize every woman that gets on here is in a biomechanical conundrum from the start. It's torturing her body. And anybody that's shorter than 5'11" or taller than 5'11" has got a lot of biomechanical stress, because it's an unnatural thing to do to the body. If a 5'2" person bends over and pick up a rock, her biomechanics are perfectly that of a 5'2", and the same rock for a 6'2" person, their body is in a field of gravity. It's got free motion. So it's kind of like, but you realize, Sean, what I know you realize is that the very kind of simplistic but basic things we're talking about are not conveyed to us in what will be called elementary education. And so we grow up getting PhDs and things, and we still don't really understand anything. Hi, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I imagine you know that magnesium is one of the minerals that people in North America are the most deficient in, but it's an extremely important mineral to have in your diet regularly. And believe it or not, Bioptimizers has improved what was already well known to be the best magnesium formula out there called Magnesium Breakthrough. So I've got Wade Lightheart with me to explain what it is they've done to improve this already excellent formula. Wade, what is new about your new Mag Breakthrough formula?
Well, it's called sucrosomial magnesium. So we have 7 different types of magnesium in Magnesium Breakthrough because they're uptaken by different parts of the body. But a new type of magnesium has been created called sucrosomial. And what it shows in the research in science is that it's actually even more absorbable by the body, particularly inside of the brain, which is a big aspect to enhance neurotransmitter formation, as well as ensuring the rest and relax response in the nervous system that a lot of people will take magnesium for. They find it, clocks them down, helps them sleep better, allows for the relaxation of striated and smooth muscle tissue in the body, which creates an energetic relief. And so when we added sucrosomial, we were able to demonstrate inside our lab facility that we were able to get better improvements. Of course, we have a partnership with Birch International University. We have some patents we're working on, which will kind of relay some of these things. But sucrosomial was a no-brainer when we added to the formula, improved the results or improved the uptake. And the reports back from our testing team were like, wow, we get more results with less caps. And that's always the goal for our company.
That's excellent. I love it. I always say, and people have probably heard me say it before, I'm so amazed how you guys are constantly and always improving and working your best to not only make better products for us, but it doesn't seem to me that it gets more expensive as you make them better. So that's a real gift to the world. Thank you.
Spirit Gym with Paul Chek listeners now get 15% off their purchase of Magnesium Breakthrough by going to bioptimizers.com/Spirit Gym and use the code PAUL15 at checkout. You can choose from the Magnesium Breakthrough capsules or the new Magnesium Breakthrough drink powder, available in 4 delicious fruit flavors or unflavored. Bioptimizers always have great bonus gifts and additional savings when you get multiple bottles. So go to bioptimizers.com/Spirit Gym and check out Magnesium Breakthrough.
It's the difference between a kind of a degree and an apprenticeship.
Yes.
Yeah. So you go in. My brother that was visiting with me as a mechanic as well.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the wisest men I know. But his practical wisdom, his ability to kind of analyze a problem and fix it. Where I'd have to go and get a book and I recognize where is the gasket. I have no idea where a gasket is. How do I get out a gasket?
Yeah.
And so it's so important that people who serve their time as apprentice and learn from the ground up, are experts in their field. Whereas kind of people who've just gone to college and earned kind of academic degrees, lots of letters after the name, but no real experience of life.
Yeah. It is what it is, but this is why the podcast is so important for me, right? Because, you have done a very long apprenticeship that's cultivated a lot of wisdom and a lot of mastery. I've certainly put a lot of time in the field working hard. And so I try to bring people on the podcast that carry wisdom. And I think when we had the breakdown of tribal society, we lost our elders because they were the wisdom carriers that used to educate the young people where mom and dad were out hunting and fishing and gathering. And so now we don't have that. Now we've got state controlled and state governed education and teachers that are burned out and frustrated because they know what they're teaching doesn't work, but nobody will let them change the curriculum. And so I think if there's anything coming out of this particular dialogue right now is that we all need to be aware that if you fall into a closed mindset and thinking you know something at the expense of experimenting, practicing, testing, you're in trouble. And one of the big challenges that young people especially face today, I've got 63,000 students worldwide, so I confront this a lot. People keep going from book to book to book, video to video to video, documentary to documentary, YouTube or Instagram or whatever, post to post to post to post. and you talk to them and they sound like they know everything, but they don't actually do anything with it. And I was just in my Spirit Gym student body, one of the members, young man, really amazing guy, but admitted, he says, Paul, I just can't seem to stop reading all the time. It's like something inside me needs to know more, but I've got like 8 books going at once, and I don't know how to quit this. And he said to me, how do you regulate what you read when there's so much to get into? And I said, look, my rule is don't read more than you can practice. If you're going to read it, you got to go out and put it to work to see if it actually applies in your life. But the good news is the more you learn and the broader your life experience is, the more you can read. Like I can read something by Carl Jung, say about the shadow or something. And because I'm 64 years old very soon here, I've worked with a lot of people, worked with my own shadow. I don't have to go test to see if the shadow is real. I can look back on my own life and all the people I've worked with and say, well, that's obvious. Like I don't need to test what's obvious. So the point is, as you grow more depth and wisdom, you actually have to first trial less and less because you can see the obviousness of how it fits. And so what you're getting is a new perspective or a new set of eyes. So you can actually learn by looking at your own experience and seeing how that applies. And if what comes out of it is, oh, I've never thought of working with my shadow that way, then you say, let's try that. So the gift is the more we learn, the faster we learn. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the essence of learning is feedback and repetition.
Yeah.
That we get, no, you can't learn unless you're getting feedback. If I go into an English pub and there's a dart competition going on and there's a dartboard on the wall and we're throwing darts at it, and somebody hangs a sheet across in the middle of the room, and I'm forced to throw the darts over the sheet at the dartboard that I can't see. Like I can't see where the darts are landing. I can't improve my aim. So feedback is essential. And then repetition, literally muscle memory. The fact that I've done it many, many, many times means that, and you know this as a kind of a military man, you have to learn how to kind of how to handle your gun again and again and again, so that in a moment of battle, you're not wondering, oh my God, this way, what's the bolt action? Did I put the stuff into it, or didn't I put the bullet in, or I put it in the wrong chamber? So you have to do it instinctively, and you can only do that by creating some kind of muscle memory. And so it's the kind of the repetition and the feedback that creates the learning. So just reading stuff in a book and not putting it into practice means I have no feedback from the learning.
Yeah, one of the sayings I quoted from my students is that repetition is the mother of skill, provided there is skill in the repetition. And it's the feedback that allows you to make changes in the repetition before you drive a faulty pattern into the system. Otherwise, it's very, very hard to get out. Now, my next question is going to take a little shift. Sean, you know Jesus tipped the table over on the money changers in the biblical story. It's not a big leap to suggest that a big percentage of the challenges we face in the world today have their roots in our perceptions, beliefs, and ways of relating to money. And on that topic, I have an excellent podcast out right now. We are recording this on June 11th with Joe Bryan, who is the most sane, clear, coherent, skilled, capable person of explaining the money situation in the world right now. So if you haven't listened to the podcast with Joe Bryan, I highly recommend it. It took me a lot of years to find someone that I felt was the perfect guy to be on my podcast, and it's a profound podcast. So when we look at this issue of money and its roots in our perceptions, beliefs, ways of relating, and the whole biblical story, that it obviously goes back a long ways, this whole thing. So how do you feel, what's the connection between our relationship with money and the problems that we face? Because as it is often said, money is the root of all evil, which in many ways has a deep truth to it. What is our way of relating to money and how we've manipulated money saying about us and the problems we've created in the world, and what's your reframe on that?
So the first important distinction is that that statement actually is from the first letter of Timothy. And what he actually said, he didn't say money is the root of all evil. He said the love of money is the root of all evil. So there's a big difference between money just as a kind of a medium of exchange of services on the one hand, and the kind of the fascination and the desire and the selfishness. So what he actually said was the love of money is the root of all evil. And in some senses, the Buddha, when he was tempted at one stage, by Mara, Mara says, turn the Himalayas, the king of all mountains, into gold, and then there'll be enough to feed everybody in the world. And Buddha's response was, even if I could turn all the mountains of the world into gold, there wouldn't be enough for one man's greed.
That's a wise answer to Mara.
Right. Absolutely. And again, when you look at Christ in the desert, the temptations again, it's about the acquisition of power.
Yeah.
For me, when you look originally in kind of primitive societies, there wasn't money per se. There were bartering systems. Mm-hmm. So I give you a dozen eggs, and you give me, a bow and arrow, And so it's a bartering system. So in small communities, it was bartering systems. But as life got more complex and kind of, you had cities eventually, the Sumerians were the first people to actually invent money as a symbol. And so what they would do, they would take a stick and break it in two. Yeah. And give one person and the other to the other person, and they fit precisely. And it was a kind of a guarantee and a promise that if you deliver this part of the stick to somebody in a far off city, they'll recognize it and they'll give you whatever your needs are. And so the first system of money actually was just some kind of a token which was broken in half. So the pieces were complementary. So I knew that, that when you came with the piece of the stick, that you're the guy who sold something else to my friend who has the other piece of the stick. So it was like they were the first people to actually invent the symbols of money. But then at some stage, it developed into just fiat currencies. I think it was Nixon in our country in the 1970s who kind of separated value from silver.
Yeah.
So it's no longer tied to a kind of a precious metal. It's a piece of paper which is totally useless. I mean, $100 bill has no intrinsic value unless you want to kind of paper a hole in your wallpaper. But it's absolutely useless. Yeah, you have to agree, that you value this piece of paper the way I value it.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, it's probably the most successful symbol of all time. There's no other symbol that's been. Even your enemies will agree to the same value for this $100 bill that I do. We disagree in everything else. But if I give you a $100 bill and you're my arch enemy, you'll accept it because you know that has intrinsic value because of the agreement. Whereas if there's a crash in the currency, it's not worth 10 cents at some stage. So it's built totally on trust. So it's interesting that here's a system that builds this extraordinary amount of trust. But then because it's extraordinarily important and has a power, it's going to be abused. And now you're going to get people grabbing it. You're going to people turning, taking all the Himalayas, even though they're turned to the gold and wanting to possess it. And so the problem then is that it's the love of money. Is what do we do with our ability to bargain or to barter our needs, whether it's for food or shelter or clothes or whatever. So how can we create a system in which, our needs are met by some form of a fiat currency, which is not controlled by an oligarchy? That's the really big problem. So I see the future as small, self-sufficient communities. So when I was in Kenya, for instance, I was in areas where I was introducing Christianity for the very first time to some communities. They'd never heard of this dude called Jesus. And so what I tried to do is, I had 3 words in Swahili. A community should be a kujitegemea, which means to be self-reliant, kujitumikia, which means to be self-ministering, and kujieneza means to be self-propagating. And that the ideal community is one in which they meet their own needs, and one in which they service to kind of the entire community, and also in which they expand because what they're doing is so successful that others will want to imitate it. But it's not that we create bigger and bigger conglomerations, but that different villages pick up the same kind of system. Say, here's a system that works. Let's kind of try that system for ourselves. And I think that that's the future. It's going to be beyond money completely. It's going to be small communities which are big enough to answer all the needs of the group and small enough that everybody knows everybody else. Because there's a special number in sociology, a number 150. If you're part of a community which has 150 or less members, you'll be able to know every single person by name. So it's a totally different energy. If you're part of a community that is bigger than that, 10 million, you don't know anybody in that community, it's a totally different form of community.
Yeah.
So some way that create these neuronal systems which are part of a circuitry, a worldwide circuitry, in which small communities, are trading with each other, but that each community largely is meeting its own needs. that there are people, who understand, cattle. There are people who understand agriculture. There are people who understand education. There are people who understand spirituality. There are people who understand medicine, and they're meeting the needs of the members of our group. So I think, the system, our present system, is obviously going to collapse, fall on its face. And there'll be several efforts, obviously, to bring in bitcoins of various kinds, or kind of this cashless societies, or kind of these credit card systems, whatever, that we can be manipulated and controlled by some kind of a global oligarchy. And that's going to have to crash and fall on its face in order for small Christian communities to resurrect into groups where I know everybody in my community, and there's somebody, who's a barber, who can cut my hair, and there's somebody, who can grow me fresh vegetables, and there's somebody there who can educate my kids. So I see that as the future.
Yeah, it's interesting when you describe money as a symbol, because it caused a flashback to a memory of my study of symbolism, because, doing the kind of work that I do with analyzing dreams and my own visions and artwork and art therapy, understanding symbols is very important. And it's a very, you can spend your life just studying symbology. But I wanted to share with you the example that an expert on symbols gave in one of the books I studied, because I think it's very unique and it would help people understand what a symbol really is. The description of how you understand what a symbol is and how it works was this, given in the book. If you and your girlfriend want to get married, but before you get married, you want to go out and see the world and have fun and have your last hurrah being single. The story goes, the two take a penny, they cut it in half, and they go off. And a year later, they plan to meet. And when they come back a year later, as part of the ceremony of putting the two halves of the penny together, they each explain to each other what happened in the years since they split the penny. And so when the penny comes together and they share their experiences, now you have what the symbol was carrying but could not be conveyed until the two halves came back together, because it was transcendent to them at the time the journey began. So the penny being cut in half represents that there's more there than the actual penny can tell you, but you can't get it without the experience that the journey describes, which I thought was a really simple, clear way to understand a symbol.
Great. So I have a theory as well that there's a distinction between signs, symbols, and sacraments.
Yes.
It comes from a Christian viewpoint. So a sign for me is one physical object standing for another physical object. Like a road sign is a piece of metal with paint on it, indicating that, in 100 meters, you're going to meet a junction to your right. And so it's a piece of metal standing for a piece of tarmac. So a sign then is just one physical thing standing for another physical thing. A symbol has one foot in physicality and one foot in the metaphysical. So like a kiss or an embrace is a symbol. So, I'm giving you a hug. So there's a physical component, but it's a protestation of my love for you. So that's again the metaphysical aspect of it. And then there's a sacrament, which is it actualizes that which it symbolizes. So for instance, if somebody in an altered state of consciousness who receives Holy Communion is actually in contact with a higher level of the body of Jesus Christ. That's really what's happening in real presence. There's a real encounter happening between the essence of Jesus and the essence of the recipient of the communion. So that will be the sacrament. Now, the problem is signs can be made to tell lies. Mm-hmm. And even symbols can be made to tell lies. So I can take a road sign and turn it around 90 degrees, and you get to the signpost and you're going to go wrong. Or a symbol can lie. Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss. And so I can tell you a lie with the symbol. But the sacraments never lie. If you're in a state of consciousness in which you're operating at a totally different level spiritually, then what you're symbolizing, you will actualize actually in your life. So for me, I like to step myself through those three gradations.
I like that. I describe a sign as different from a symbol, and that a sign has an agreed upon meaning with no transcendent function. So everybody knows when you see a stop sign, we know its shape and its color. Even if the writing's been wiped off, we know it only means one thing: step on the brake. Doesn't mean step on the gas. It doesn't mean you're going to meet Jesus or Buddha. It means step on the brake here and stop so you don't get killed. And this is really what I think Nietzsche was referring to when he said God is dead, is that the church fathers had concretized the symbols into signs. So everybody thought they knew what God was and what God wanted. And so there was no, you took the transcendence away from the mass and from the experience, because now it was just concretized words, which goes right back to our discussion of memorization as concretization. I think, I've studied Ibn al-Arabi's work, Henry Corbin's work, and Jung extensively, but, I think it's Henry Corbin has a beautiful book, a lot of reference to Ibn al-Arabi, but it's called The World as Icon. And it basically shows how everything in the world is a symbol. And it is really it's really here to direct us to what we were referring to earlier as the essence of things. To, the tree is not just a physical thing. It symbolizes life. There's something inside of it that's conscious and aware, like a flower knows where the sun is at all times, and it turns. And, so there's that transcendent thing. And I think there's an example of something that we're not taught, and that even people that study religion and metaphysics seldom understand, because I've talked to many of them. And, like I have enough time in dialogue with you in sense of your presence that when I'm looking at Sean right now through my computer screen, I don't concretize Sean. I relate to Sean as a wise man who can add depth and dimension to my own understanding and give me a chance to express things that maybe I wouldn't have said talking to somebody else, because of your ability to understand me and see the common intention of what we're sharing. In other words, what I'm saying is I'm looking at my friend Sean O'Leary, but I'm also looking at a symbol for the divine. And it's, to me, it's very easy to see that, right? It's like I get to hang out with a really amazing expression of the divine, and I never know what's going to come out of these conversations, right? So, like, no, if you and I had 1,000 of them, I would always be excited for, the next one, because I don't know what's going to come out, And so I think that's just, you understand what I'm saying? If we realized each other as symbols and everything is a symbol, and we didn't just see it as an object, but we said, how can I make this sacred and connect to it? And that would inspire us to work on developing our clairvoyance, our clairaudience, our clairsentience, our intuition, because those are the things that let you see beyond signs. Those are symbolic modes of perception. And I think that if we focused on that, the world would transform radically, because we would be doing in the garden what we really meant to do, as based on our previous talking on that in this podcast. Aside from my next one, we'll change gears now. Aside from the negative influences on male-female relations that emanate from religious programming, it is evident that the social engineers and those driven by motives of genocide are also working hard to deteriorate male-female relationships and the family unit. I feel that patriarchy has become dangerous, so dangerous, in fact, that we now literally have patriarchal women in positions of power. We're even confused about what a woman is. How do you feel about the challenges between males and females, or how do you feel the challenges between males and females are contributing to the world situation, and what suggestions do you have for restoring harmony between both the masculine and feminine energies and consciousness thereof? So harmony between the masculine and feminine energies that are moving through us and awareness of them, but also harmony between males and females. I've said many times on podcasts, and I really believe this, and as you know, I have 2 wives, so I've got a real respect for the divine feminine. I feel that right now, more than ever, we need leadership from healthy women. We need women with heart and soul to step in. Somebody that comes to my mind right off the bat is Catherine Austin Fitz, as an example of, wow, like there's she power in its fullness, right? And there's, of course, there's many others, but I just think that this is part of the conundrum that we've got going on right now, everything I've just mentioned. So I'm sorry if I threw too much at you. If you want me to refine the question, I can.
Let me respond to it. It's a very important topic. So one of the things that amazed me, I came to the States in 1987, having spent, the first 25 years of my life in Ireland in a European kind of a cultural context, and then the next 14 years in East Africa with an African context, and then coming to the States. And so I saw the male-female dynamic in 3 totally different cultural contexts. And it's interesting to me, when I came to the States, I was immediately kind of flabbergasted by the number of what I can only call animus-driven viragos that I encountered. Really, really angry women. So where I come from Ireland, where the women controlled the family, but they did it very, very kind of very, very gently. And in Africa, although the women seemed to be subject, the women were the power force in Africa. They were in charge of all food production. Men were in charge of hunting, and guarding the group. And so the dynamic between men and women in Africa and in Europe, while not perfect, patriarchal definitely, but a much better fit than what I found in the United States, with really, really angry women and emasculated males. I was in a class, a PhD class. There were 24 of us. There was only 5 guys in it, and apart from myself, all the guys were just total chicken shits. And all the women, yeah, absolutely.
That's sad.
Yeah. And all the
it's
women,
worse now.
yeah, all the women were really angry viragos.
Yeah.
And so I gave a lecture at one stage. Every student was giving a lecture on a topic, and I called it Patriarchy, Matriarchy, and Hatetriarchy. the anger that I was experiencing in this class, when of course I got dumped on like crazy. So,
you expected that, though, I bet.
I expected that, absolutely expected that. But there was no way I was going to sit with 5 other male sheep in the class and just be dumped upon. Yeah. And a lot of these women, their husbands were financing their PhD studies, and they spent nonstop just criticizing their husbands.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was pissing me off royally.
I don't doubt it.
What I could see was that there needed to be a redressing of the patriarchal system. But what I've seen is that there are just as many corrupt women in prominent positions in America right now, and all over Europe right now. And so just replacing men with women is not the solution. So it's not just taking men out of important international positions and slotting in a woman into it. What you're looking for is a kind of a balance between the yin and the yang energies, both within the individual and among us. There's this great statement where in the New Testament where Jesus says the kingdom of God is, the phrase that's used in Greek is en mesoi. And en mesoi means within you, it's intrapsychic, and among you, it's sociological. I would say this very same thing. The yin and yang has to be en mesoi. There has to be a kind of complementarity within the individual person of the yin and the yang energies, and then a complementarity in any one group of people. In any group of people, there will be people who hold more of the yang energy and people who hold more of the yin energy. But if it's a team, if it's working as a team properly, it'll be the ideal fit. But what's happening now is you got this total kind of rise of angry females in positions of power who are just as much war hawks and as corruptible as the men that preceded them. And
Margaret Thatcher types.
Margaret Thatcher, people like the head of the European community right now.
Or the Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Exactly. So there are lots of, the person who was in charge of the CDC in our own country up to recently.
Yeah.
So we saw it at every level. The corrupt, female, I call it toxic femininity. So there's toxic femininity and there's toxic masculinity. So the question becomes then, how do we create a balance between the yin and the yang energies within the individual person? Because it's appropriate sometimes to be more yang and sometimes to be more yin. And then within the group, who within the group, best, whom can we call upon to kind of demonstrate more yang energy because that's what the situation needs? Whom can we call upon in the group to demonstrate more yin energy because that's what the group needs right now? So that it's a fluid kind of exchange of abilities. That's the future. But there's angry female replacing corrupt men as we're falling on our face, flat on our face right now.
Yeah, I think too, part of it is we each have to grow up to the point where we can set aside the need to be in charge, in power, the center of attention, and have enough empathetic or emotional intelligence to recognize Like if you and I were in a group of people trying to solve a problem, and one of the problems was to understand how to raise the children in the best way, you, Sean, may be able to express your femininity in saying, well, this is the best way to discipline children. Like I was raised where you just got the shit beat out of you, and you might be able to say, Paul, that was unfortunate, but it produces negative outcomes in your children, and your own children are proof of that. Look at how angry they are. And then we might need to move some big stones in order to expand the garden. But you at 150 pounds and me at 180 pounds as a guy who's a weightlifter that can lift heavy stones, it would be natural to say, well, Paul, why don't you go move those stones? But you see, if we don't have the depth of emotional intelligence for me to recognize when I need to relate to the feminine in Sean, and if I'm too alpha male, I might try to say, Sean, you're going to go move those stones, like it or not. And the next thing you know, we got the wrong person doing the wrong thing, and I haven't recognized the real benefit of the part of you that's more developed than the part of me. So that in other words, what I'm saying is somehow we've got to develop emotional intelligence. We've got to get past our insecurities and need to constantly try to control everything so that we can identify who do we ask for guidance in each given situation, because the guy that's lifting the stones may not be the best guy to give you parenting advice.
So for me, then it's a question of matching the kind of the talents and the abilities with the needs of a group. So I remember in my time in Kenya, guys would get constantly moved around. I was in 7 different missions in 14 years. And so what happened was the kind of superiors, whether it was the bishop or whatever it was, there's a need someplace else, we'll take this guy. Whether this guy was fit for it or not, it didn't matter. So whether you were in charge of an agricultural college, or you were in charge of a parish, or you were a headmaster of a school, just yank a guy out because there's a need and slot this guy in. And what I would say to the kind of superiors was, know your guys, know your priests, and find out what are their talents and what are their interests. And find jobs that fit their interests and their talents. And then everybody is happy and you get a great job done. But if you operate on the principle that there's a need, we're going to move somebody in, whether it's the right guy or the wrong guy, whether he wants to be there or he doesn't want to be there, there's an opening there and you're going there. And you get a lot of kind of disgruntled and kind of people who are not up to the task happening. So I would see this in any community, that you have to see what are the needs of the community, what are the talents and the interests of the group, and therefore you slot the appropriate talent and the appropriate interest into the need of the group, and then the group's needs are being met.
You see, because if what you are alluding to with the fact that it's what the system we're in is inevitably going to break down, we're going to have to go into tribes of 150 or less. And research on tribal society shows that tribes break down after about 150 people. Some say as little as 65. We're going to have to develop these skills, or what we're going to have is a bunch of people beating the shit out of each other over everything. So somewhere along the line, we might as well work on that now. But the other thing is that surely you are aware that the quality of workmanship in the world today is just going down the tubes fast. I mean, shit, we bought a brand new refrigerator, cost us $14,000. For the first 6 months we had it, did nothing but cause trouble. Freezing up, couldn't control the temperatures, fans squealing, and how we had to get the damn thing replaced. And it took us, I don't know how long, I think it might have been months and months, if not 6 months or a year, before they finally replaced it. We just bought a brand new stove, not even 5 or 6 months ago. It's already completely broken down, and we've had repairmen out 5 times and battles now. And Penny just met with them to say, you got to replace this thing on warranty. It's brand new and it doesn't work. We just had to have the washing repairman in. Our washing machine's not very old at all. Yeah. And yet it's squealing like hell. And I said to the repairman, what the hell's going on with this thing? It's almost new. He said, oh, you don't want to buy these front loaded washing machines because the weight of the water causes the weight. It causes too much load on the bearing that's on the axle, and it keeps wearing the bearings out. So if you want a washing machine that lasts a long time, buy a top loader. I'm like, okay, great. Well, I spent fucking $1,000 on this thing, and now you're telling me it was a piece of shit to begin with. Now, I wish it could stop there. We've had to have our well pump replaced 3 times. It just keeps dying. And I said to the freaking drillers that we hired, the well company. I said, what the fuck's going on? I said, I used to drill wells myself when I was a young man, and we would put a pump in, it would last for 20 years. Yeah. He said, Paul, what happened is when COVID happened, they couldn't get the people that were normally supposed to be here working because of whether it be religious exemptions or not religious exemptions. So the only people they could get to come in were people that would work together, whether they had masks on or not, but they didn't know how to put the pumps together. So I said, so they still sell me a pump for $10,000 and the fucking thing doesn't work. I'm like, but you see, the point I'm making is what you described is you do this, you do that in the tribal situation. But the thing is, we've really got to orient ourselves to not only doing things that we love to do, but doing them with some esprit de corps, some real passion to producing a good product instead of just passing the buck to the next guy, because pretty soon everything in the world's going to be broken down.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's just such it's like, don't you ever marvel at the convergence of total fucking craziness going on?
And to top it all, you got more and more bureaucrats calling the shots, people who have no interest in the final product and no kind of knowledge of the final product, and they're making all the decisions and imposing them on others.
It's freaking crazy, which leads right to my next question again. We're in harmony today, Sean.
Very good.
Technology is a double-edged sword. I've heard experts suggest that our technological advancements are about 15 orders of magnitude ahead of our moral sensitivities and capabilities, and you might have been one of those people. What are your thoughts in this regard? How do you suggest we manage technologies in safe, spiritual-oriented ways? And what are your suggestions for developing our moral competencies?
And so for me, there's a very interesting kind of a dance between science and conscience. The word conscience actually literally is conscientia in the Latin languages. So con means with, and scientia is science. So conscience is that which is meant to go along with science. So you've got science and conscientia, that which goes along with science. So originally the idea was that every kind of scientific development has to be kind of balanced by, the effects on society. And so, for instance, in indigenous societies in this continent, that decisions were made based on the kind of the fallout for 7 generations down the line.
Right.
So all the effects be 7 generations henceforth. So that's the ultimate in conscience, that all technology and all science is predicated upon the kind of long-term ramifications of it. But now we've got science totally unhinged. We don't even know what the ramifications of it are going to be in 2 or 3 years' time. We look at the fiasco of COVID and the shots, and the kind of the inoculation of people and the extraordinary results for that, because there was no planning for the future. What are the long-term effects of that kind of assault on the human body medically? And so try to kind of get these to pace each other again. So whether it's some kind of a religion or scientific, community whose function is to look at the advances of science, whether it's nuclear abilities, or kind of, medical technology or artificial intelligence, whatever it is, and to measure, what level and what speed of technology is commensurate with the human ability to kind of control it and to use it for good. So
yes,
I think that's the future, this kind of rebalancing of science and conscience. But at the moment, there's this total focus on a 3-dimensional materialistic scientism. And so if it can be invented or developed, let's develop it with no thought to the long-term consequences. And so I remember, I'll give you an example from my own work in Kenya. I lived in very remote areas for 14 years, literally on the equator. And so a lot of what I was trying to do was, you talked about drilling wells, was about water production. And so I would get money from the European aid organizations like Miserior to kind of buy pipes and stuff like that. And then the locals would provide the labor, they'd dig the trenches and whatever. And most of the projects were very successful. But I remember 2 spectacular failures. And one of them, we piped water. It was a 2-year project. We got it to the village. There's a big ceremonial turning on of the water in the village after 2 years, and nothing comes out. And we go back, they're just PVC piping, and a warrior from a different village who didn't get a water project just took a spear and just jabbed it in the PVC piping about every 100 yards. So the water just spouting all over the place. So he had perfect water, but the pipes were broken. Another one, we piped water successfully, about 2 miles again, and we turned on the water and it flowed copiously and everybody drank. And 2 days later, everybody in the village is down with dysentery because the source was polluted. We didn't realize it. So what it said to me is that, you've got the structures and you've got the personnel. And if the structures are faulty, you don't deliver the product to the consumer. And if the personnel are faulty, you're going to poison the consumer. So it's what Jesus says, new wine, new wineskins. So we have to have systems, whether it's of education or entertainment or medicine or whatever, that are really well crafted and are delivering a good product to the consumer. And we have to make sure that people who staff those organizations are themselves committed to their own spiritual evolution. So it's really, really important. If you don't have spiritual people in these institutions, they'll corrupt, they'll deliver a corrupted product to the consumer. And if the organizations are leaky, the consumer is not going to get the product. So it's this balance again between individual kind of commitment to a spirituality and creating structures that actually are working on behalf of the populace, not against them.
I think this really goes back to one of the key tenets of spiritual consciousness, and that is the realization that we are all expressions of each other and we're all expressions of the divine. I think without that, it's really like whatever I can get, I take, and screw you. And, I'm in it for the money. I don't care about the rest of it. So it leads to some very short-sighted, short-term thinking, and it generates illusions that inherently create karma, but it doesn't matter when your washing machine doesn't work if the other guy's got the karma. You still can't wash your clothes. So it's really, I totally agree with you, Sean, but the challenge we're facing is like, if you said, okay, if I gave you unlimited amounts of money, or let's say Bill Gates came to you and said, Sean, you can have as much money as you want to accomplish the objective of restructuring systems, businesses, and education so that we have spiritually intact leadership. The question is, do you actually think that you could find enough people that are open enough, willing enough, and capable enough of developing the level of spiritual awareness to be those leaders and make that transition before we run into a crisis that is terminal?
Part of the problem is that the leadership models that we have are based in a hierarchical system. So very often, even if the guy at the very top is a loving, spiritual, deep person, who issues decrees of various kinds, they never filter down through the ranks, to the kind of the consumer. And so you have to have everybody within the system has to be kind of committed to the product. And so, it's not going to filter down otherwise. So it becomes really, really important then that everybody is committed to it. And that the first focus, I think, has to be on the individuals rather than the structures. Ideally, you can do both at the same time. But if I had to make a choice between them, focusing on the individual is more important. So that brings me back to the very first temptation of Jesus in the desert. When Satan tempts him to turn the bread in the desert, the stones of the desert into bread because he's been fasting for 40 days. And Christ says, no, I'm not going to do it. And so he realized that it's not just that Satan was saying, here's a rock here, turn it into a loaf of bread and feast on it. What he was saying to Jesus is, if you're really the Christ, you could turn all the rocks in all the world into bread and feed the whole world. And Christ realized, if I did it, some oligarchy would grab all the resources and then parcel it out to those who played the game with them. So he says, no, that's not how to do it. And then he gave him power. He showed him all the kings of the world. He says, all these will belong to you. If there's bowing down, you will worship me. And Christ felt, wow, I could be in charge of the armies, the finances, the education, the medicine, the agriculture, the political system. I'd have control of all these things. Wow, I could change the world immediately. And when he realized I couldn't, I'd be on top of the heap and everybody below me be corrupted and they'd fuck up what I was trying to do, or first what I was trying to do. So no, I'll pass on that one. And so I think, if Bill Gates gave me $1 billion and said, go create a model, I would say, okay, I want everybody to go and meditate. I want to force everybody to do plant medicine and meditation for 2 years, and then we start creating a kind of structures,
Yes.
And people with these kind of people.
Yeah. Well, I agree on both accounts. I'd say do meditation and learn to control your mind, at least so that you can handle the plant medicine, and then meet with your counselor to show you how to take the experiences from the plant medicine into actual practice, or you just become an ayahuasca addict.
Exactly.
And we strip the jungles and have to make it in laboratories.
So I'm going to have to say no to Bill.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, you realize that we've now discussed about 8 different beautiful paradoxes.
Wow.
Right? You see that, right? It's like everywhere we go, we're facing some kind of real, inescapable reality that we have to confront. And that's one of the things that concerns me is people are just, they're so tired and so lazy and so addicted and so trapped that they're just the ostrich has its head in the sand waiting for Donald Trump or somebody or Jesus to fix it all. And as we need more accountability, more responsibility, and more participation, we're getting less and less and less of it. And I don't want to be a fatalist. I mean, the way I navigate this is I know it's all God. So
yes,
the worst thing that happens is God.
Right. And so that's really important. One of the things I see is that there's a concerted movement at this stage to destroy history, to destroy the present, and to destroy the future.
Yeah.
So, we're destroying our history by claiming that America is an evil, racist, colonialist, regime. So we're destroying our entire history. We who brought democracy to the world, we who saved the slaves, we who gave more than 600,000 American lives to end slavery in the country. Now we're the evil. So they've destroyed our history. They're destroying the present with this kind of revisionistic, propagandistic notion of who we are as a nation right now. And they're trying to destroy the future by segregating families, destroying kids, creating a future in which, transgenderism and transhumanism, and we're separating kids from their parents. And so it becomes really important then. I believe that there are 3 versions of the future. There's the probable future, the possible future, and the inevitable future. Now, I don't believe in anything such as inevitable future. Some people would have us believe there's no way out. You're stuck. We're fucked. That is inevitable. I don't believe in that. I believe there's a possible future and a probable future, and that the function of the prophet is not to predict the future, it is to prevent the future. Mm-hmm. The prophet can see very clearly where we're headed and is calling us back into our covenanted relationship with God. And so every single one of us made a covenant with God. When you volunteered and you said, "Here I am, Lord, send me," you volunteered to be on planet Earth right now in this culture at this era of human history. You knew exactly what you were signing up for, and you said, send me. And so the prophet then is the person who's able to prevent the future by parachuting in and creating a different outcome of present circumstances. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why I'm so fascinated by the Lightworkers.
Yeah.
The people who consciously volunteered, knowing exactly what the odds were and what the price was going to be, and said, "Send me anyway."
Here's a question I didn't have on our list, but I got to throw it at you just for fun, because this one can go all sorts of interesting ways. What do you think God's learning from all this?
Well, as I say, I differentiate between the transcendence of God and the immanence of God. So even Christian theology had recognized what they call process theology, mm-hmm. which was the notion that God herself is evolving mm-hmm. through all of her creation. As creation evolves, God is evolving as well. So there's the transcendence of God, which is beyond time and space, and of which we can say nothing. And then there's the immanence of God as she manifests through her creation. And of course, everything is a feedback system at that level. So there is nothing which is not a feedback loop for God. And there is nothing which is not allowing God to evolve. So I think God is evolving at an extraordinary rate. But there's you and I had this kind of discussion the last time. But mm-hmm. Lao Tzu said, for instance, what did he say? All things are born of being, and being is born of non-being.
Yes.
Yeah. And in Hinduism, they will say para Brahma. There's a place beyond Brahma. And in Meister Eckhart would say, the Godhead is beyond God. And he would say, I pray daily to God to rid me of God. And so coming into the realization that there's an ineffability about which we can say nothing, but there's certainly a manifestation and an immanence, which we experience, and which obviously is in a loop, is a feedback system which is learning constantly from its behavior. So not only is God learning qua God, the immanence of God, but God is learning through, as oak trees learn to adapt to an environment, as bunny rabbits learn to adapt to an environment, as human beings learn to adapt to the present circumstances. So every wave of the ocean is learning from the beach on which it finds itself, traveling. And let's bring that back into the ocean again. So every single wave is learning, and the ocean itself is learning. And so, God is learning. The immanence of God is learning and enjoying the ride. This is Lila. This is the game.
Yeah, it's the dance. It's the art. It's the play. It's the drama. It's the love story. I think too, what we're talking about right now and what you're sharing, it's a realization. It's a realization that if you don't have and you take a materialistic view, then everything that's happening becomes very scary, doesn't make sense, and the future is just bleak.
Deadly.
But when you really can, when you can embrace within yourself that I am an expression of the divine, we're all an expression of the divine, and that our life, I tell my students, you are Ram Dass, you are God workers, right? When we can realize that and realize that in each other, we can literally collectively say, what do we want to share with God now?
Absolutely.
Do we need more bombs? Do we need more pain? Do we need to poison our children and have more of this? No, because we know that that's not very holy. If anything, we're just boring God to death because we keep playing that stupid record over and over again. Yeah. It's like, what could we get together and do that would even make God excited, right? And so what does it boil down to? It always boils down to some expression of love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So let's figure out ways to have empathy and compassion for each other and find ways to love each other. And I think, you can see behind me, I have a lot of money invested in a very, very good stereo. And I love music, right? And I love listening to Hazrat Fateh Ali Khan, a Sufi master that just makes gorgeous music, which is all Sufi prayers. I love listening to music from all over the world. I've got a large collection of music from around the world, and it's stunning. And so I often find myself just taking a moment to pause and just bowing and saying thank you to these amazing musicians and singers for the beauty you add to my life. And I love good food. And when I get great Chinese food or Japanese food or Jamaican or whatever it is, it's like, oh my God, the flavors, the experience. And it's neat to see how they do this and all the ways you can do things with corn. Who would have known, I think if we would just celebrate the diversity and the beauty, because even the funny thing is that even people that are harsh racists and white supremacists will be driving down the road listening to Motown, and not even aware of it. It's just like, oh man, I love this Stevie Wonder. Yeah, but you'd fucking kill the guy if he was in front of you and you wouldn't even realize it was him. Like, it's like, do you see what I'm saying, Sean? Is if we really just realized if we are agents of God expressing possibilities and creativities, that we have free will, why don't we express more of what we inherently know makes us feel good and is good for everybody? It doesn't seem like it takes a whole lot of common sense to figure that out, but it also seems to be that, and unless you can try, I think it's the fastest way out of the situation we're in is just to all hold still and say, if you don't know how we got here, it's a mystery. God's just a placeholder for the word mystery. But whatever that mystery is the source of everything, including you and I. And if we're learning, it's learning. If we're hating, it's experiencing that. If we're loving, why not just say, hey, let's embrace the mystery and feed back something that, if repeated, actually helps us grow and evolve.
And so kind of to pull it together for myself, Paul, I came up with a system a few years ago about problem solving. If I'm faced with any kind of a problem, I walk myself through 5 kind of stages of it. The first one I say, I am a holographic fractal of God. Just realize that. The second one, I volunteer to be here right now. The third one, I am deeply grateful for all of the people and kind of resources that are in my life right now. The fourth one is, I want to harvest this present predicament in order to kind of further my own mission of waking myself up and waking everybody else up. And then fifthly, and only fifthly, okay, let me deal now with the practicalities of solving the situation. But I would walk myself through the other four first so that the solutions are coming out of gratitude and a sense of inner divinity, and my kind of participation in the human family. So, for me, that approach to problem solving is really important because it contextualizes it very, very differently.
Yeah, I think it's you're a great guy for formulas. I like formulas too, because the reason I do is it helps you systematize the flow of energy and creativity.
Yes.
Because like what you're talking about, almost all the formulas that I've ever heard you say, almost universal applicability.
Yes.
It's not like how do you figure out the square root of 69? You need a specific formula, or a squared plus b squared is c squared. It works great for a triangle or whatever. But like what you just shared is applicable to almost every aspect of a human life, right? And so I love that, because that to me is the wisdom that only a guy like Sean O'Leary can bring to the table, because you have to have enough life experience and enough death and enough wisdom to even figure that out.
Yeah.
But like a simple formula like that, like it might have came from you, but in Spirit Gem, one of the things, because I shared your cosmology from the podcast that we did, and I've got a picture of you and say this is and what podcast it comes from, and I say, here's Sean's suggestions for developing your own cosmology. But I had my artist do a beautiful piece of art, and the art says it's like a trinity. It's in a beautiful flower, and it says, "What do I choose to do as God, with God, and for God?"
Beautiful.
As God, with God, and for God. I think those three things. What do I choose to do as God, a creator, with God, the beloved, and for God, because that's all there is here. Yeah. The people I love are God, and the people I don't love are God, and the problems of the world are God. So when we accept responsibility that we are as God, we are God-like, we can make changes, that we're always with God, and there's nothing you can't do that isn't for God, or the concept doesn't exist, and we have a lot more question marks to deal with.
Yeah.
So these are the simple things that I think if young people could grab a hold of a few of these things, it could really change their life.
Absolutely.
My next one's another shift in direction here. The children of the world are the future of the world and humanity. Children, as you know, are in the worst physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual condition possibly ever in the history of mankind. What do you feel is primarily responsible for the degradation of children's health, education, and lives? And what suggestions do you feel are most important for all of us to implement now for the children, knowing that they are the future?
So it's interesting. Some years ago, I created what I call the Lightworkers Manifesto. Mm-hmm. And I actually printed up a copy of it for today's conversation. So let me just read it out for you.
Great.
So I call it the Lightworkers Manifesto. We are in a battle for the soul of the planet. And so God is sending in the warriors and light bringers, whose mission is to take education away from the child molesters, to take economics away from the banksters, to take healing away from big pharma, to take storytelling away from the mass media, to take entertainment away from Hollywood, to take food production away from agribusiness, to take fire away from the military-industrial complex, to take democracy away from the politicians, and to take spirituality away from Mecca and Rome. So for me, that for me is the blueprint of where we're headed, of where we need to go.
I hope like hell you're right.
Yeah.
And so
kids at the top of the list there, obviously.
What's that?
The kids are at the top of that list.
Yeah. What was the kids again?
It was to take education away from the child molesters.
Right.
Yeah. And to take entertainment away from Hollywood, because Hollywood are doing an extraordinary job in corrupting our children.
Yeah. So is social media and now AI. AI is becoming a real problem. I could go on for hours on that, but I have a podcast I'm working on with someone who has a lot of knowledge on that. Yeah. Well, I think we must all be much more aware of what a child is, what a child needs, and how our children literally are our future. And I'll give you an example of, I had a very tough childhood, but my stepfather used to be a special effects man for Universal Studios. He had a degree in agriculture, and my mom and him decided that because my mother had 3 kids, I was the oldest of the 3. My dad had his daughter, and they wanted to have children of their own, but they decided that they needed to get out of LA because they didn't feel Los Angeles was a good place to raise a family. So they immigrated to Vancouver Island in British Columbia and bought a 142-acre farm, which is where I was raised in Canada from the age of 12. And even though my childhood was very challenging, I often say to my friends, thank the fucking Lord my parents were farmers, and that I got to spend time in nature and with animals and learn the realities of how nature works and how life and death works, and how much responsibility you have to have responsibility, and young people have to learn responsibility. My father's rule, you don't dare eat before the animals eat. You don't drink before the animals drink. He said, if I ever catch you eating or drinking, now water he didn't care about, but he meant like sitting at the table and having a meal. He said, if I ever catch you eating before those animals are fed, you will never, ever forget what happens. And he meant that, dude. There was no question what he meant. And what he was teaching us is that you must pay close attention to what your life depends on.
Yes.
And you must make that more important than your personal needs, because when that doesn't provide, you won't meet your personal needs. And so just learning about how too much water in the soil causes root rot and hoof rot, and just without a long list of things like, our children today often never ever put their feet in the dirt, and the dirt they put their feet in is parks poisoned with glyphosate. And they don't understand natural cycles. They know all about their iPhone, but they haven't got a clue where their food comes from. They don't even really know much about animals or about nature. It's just like, wow, we have actually gotten so caught in the mental dimension of reality that we've cut our roots off from the earth. And that is just as dangerous as all get out. So I think somehow, for anyone listening, we need programs designed to bring children back into nature. If I had the money, I'd start a big farm specifically to bring children in and have assistance, like almost like 4-H.
Yes.
But, assign them, okay, this week you're going to work with the sheep expert. And this week you're going to work in the garden. And this week you're going to work with
fruit trees.
And then the next week you're going to go work in the shop and see what it takes to repair all this equipment. And really let them live there and experience being part of the harvesting of the food, the cleaning, the washing, the cooking, taking care of animals, shearing sheep, castration, slaughter. I tell people all the time, look, you wouldn't eat so much meat if you actually had to slaughter an animal yourself, gut it, and watch its life leave. It'll change you. I mean, I used to, when I was a kid, I remember the first time that one of my best friends as a pig had to get slaughtered, and I had to watch my dad kill it and gut it, and within hours of me petting it and feeding it, I was eating it. And I remember castrating animals all the time, and I had to hold the animal still when my dad took a razor blade, slit its ball sack open, pulled the testicles out, and chopped the sperm cords, and then closed them up. And then we would take those balls in the house, throw them in a frying pan, and eat them. I had to go through this painful transition, which I've watched my kids have to go through, from how do you reconcile eating something that you had deep love for as a friend? And so I think if we get too detached from the realities of life, then we start abusing life, not realizing what we're doing, because what was your friend just becomes an object, right? And I think that's part of the problem with people like Bill Gates is they've just turned everything into an item in a catalog that they can buy, sell, and trade with no consequences of the effect because they don't believe that life is conscious. They think it's just all biological robots. And that's why we have all this animal research with torturing of animals and things like that because of this sort of Skinnerian mindset, which is just so sad. Those are just some thoughts. We're coming right to the end, Sean. Now you realize a miracle's about to happen.
What is that?
You and I are about to finish an entire outline in one podcast. That's never happened before.
Oh, God. Yeah, go ahead.
What?
Either we're getting good at it or the lists are getting shorter.
Well, a little shorter. My last one had 15 questions on it for you, but I learned 15 questions with Sean and Paul is very dangerous unless you have a 10-hour podcast. But I remember distinctly when Bill Moyers was interviewing Joseph Campbell and discussing what happens when a culture's myth breaks down. Their descriptions match what is happening in the world now very, very well. Bill Moyers asked Joseph Campbell what he thought the next myth would be. Joseph Campbell said, I don't know, but I know it will be an earth-centered myth. Can you share your thoughts regarding the importance of the myth, of myth in context of the world situation we're in, and what do you feel the next guiding myth for humanity will be or needs to be?
Brilliant. And so when I hear the word earth myth, two things come up for me. I'm thinking of the planet itself in its various levels of body, and I'm thinking of Earth as particularly as a kind of a human community, so that every myth has to involve all the peoples of the world as a unity. And I'm not talking about some kind of a globalist agenda, a WEF. I'm not talking about that, but that all our decisions are predicated upon the fact that there are 8 billion other people sharing the planet with us. So I think of Earth as kind of Homo sapiens sapiens writ large, and I think of Earth as Gaia herself. And as I said, I believe that I think I've tried to create it for myself when I created this model of Earth having 7 different levels, that there's the physiosphere, the atmosphere, the biosphere, the noosphere, the animosphere, the pneumosphere, and the cosmosphere. That for me, it has to be a myth that kind of looks at the Earth not just as a rock with life on it, but that it has a soul, that it's animated by a great soul, a much greater soul than animates you or me as individual human beings.
Oh, yes.
It takes an extraordinary soul to be able to kind of animate an entire planetary system with all its life forms. And so this extraordinary advanced Mahatma, to kind of relate to this Mahatma, Pachamama or Gaia, whatever we're to give to it. And so that the mythology, I think, must incorporate those levels of our mother, not just the physical home that we call planet Earth that gives us like kind of shelter and food and air and water. That's just the provisions that the physical and the biological, give to us. But a realization that your own mother, if your own mother is breastfeeding as a little infant, that she's not just a source of milk and comfort, but that she's a woman herself with a soul, and that you learn to appreciate her not just as a source of sustenance, but as a human being in her own right and an extraordinary being, that we have to kind of grow into that realization of Gaia, and that the mythology is going to pick up on that, the many, many different levels at which our mother exists, that will be the mythology.
Yeah. Classically, mythologies have been thought to come from shaman, poets, musicians, mystics, people that have an inner ear, not just an outer ear. How do you think this new myth's going to emerge?
I think more and more that there's going to be a cadre of what I call light workers. Well, I'm not the person who invented that term, but light workers on both sides of the veil, that literally there are angelic beings, who are guiding this process from outside the sphere, and then there are awakened beings inside it. And as you mentioned, you're going to find them in every kind of facet of life. As you say, some of them will be musicians, some will be artists, some will be spiritual guides, some will be just bushmen in the Kalahari, in total resonance with their ground. Some will be the kind of aboriginals of Australia who realize that all all earth was called into being by the singing of the ancestors. And so to realize that these are all instruments in the orchestra, you know, and that it is the totality of the wind instruments and the kind of the violins and kind of the guitars and the conductor, that the entire thing creates kind of the symphony, and that every part is necessary in order for the symphony to kind of come alive. So anybody who's awake, anybody who's speaking mythish, you know, through music or art or dancing or whatever, they're the people who are going to co-create the future.
I think, too, that Mother Gaia, the soul of the world, speaking to as many people as possible that are open to hearing, I think she herself is calling us forth into, I mean, I would see her as a form of the expression of the divine feminine, divine mother.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And so I think she is aware that her children are lost and is probably speaking to us in our dreams in any way she can get us, be it plant medicine ceremonies or music or meditation. So I give thanks to her and connect to her in my heart every day. And I'm open to messages to her. And there's something that happened the other day, Sean. It was maybe a month ago now, but when I was just listening to you talk, I thought, wow, I got to share this with Sean because this is interesting. I you know, every day, you can't see it, but right over here, I have a mandala I painted that represents the sun. And because I did a year of sun gazing, and I had very profound experiences with the spirit of the sun, or the oversoul of the sun, and who told me his name is Umbakara, sometimes referred to as Agni and other names, but the name he gave me was Umbakara. And so I connect to him every day as part of my morning prayer ritual. And I just had the question. I said to him, I said, Umbakara, I said, I have a question for you. Is there a spirit to the Milky Way galaxy that is the correlate of what you are to the sun? And he said, absolutely. He said, would you like to meet that spirit? And I said, I'd love it. So he said, empty yourself and I will introduce you to her. And all of a sudden, inside my inner vision, my clairvoyance, my third eye, I was seeing the whole galaxy. And then my conscious awareness narrowed, and in the middle was a giant black hole, which was out of which was rising a beautiful lotus. And sitting in this giant lotus, which, you know, the size of it would have been what you'd figure for the middle of a galaxy, was this beautiful, wise, serene looking woman of blue light. Like, you know how sometimes you see Krishna painted in blue, but she was sitting in meditation. And then she opened her eyes and looked at me. And I said, are you the spirit or the soul of the Milky Way galaxy? She said, yes, I am. I said, what is your name? She said, my name is Amor.
Oh, love.
Yeah. She said, my name is Amor. I am Amor. And so I talked to her for a while, but the imprint is so powerful. As soon as I have a chance to paint, I'm going to paint that experience and paint what I saw.
That's beautiful, Paul. That is beautiful.
Yeah. I wanted to share that with you because you're the kind of guy that can appreciate that and not think I'm a complete lunatic.
No, I believe I call it organ-specific receptors, that everything from a single cell all the way up to the cosmos itself, you know, has specific receptors for kind of receiving the grace of God. And obviously, Amor was a kind of a galactic, you know, receptor for that.
Yeah. Beautiful. Amor, I was surprised, you know, when she said Amor. I'm like, wow, that's cool. Beautiful. You know, sometimes I get names like Umbakara and I'm like, I have to go figure out if I can find out what that means. And, you know, crazy kind of like, okay, I got sometimes it takes hours to find these things. But as soon as she said Amor, I'm like, well, that doesn't require any research at all. And it's really powerful. And it also reminded me of Ra's teachings, because Ra said that, I believe he said our galaxy is weighted 51% to love, and that all you've got to do is become at least 51% loving to evolve, and you will move forward in your spiritual evolution. You don't have to, you know, work too hard at it as long as you're at least 51% loving. I thought, well, that's pretty fair.
Yeah.
That's not too
horrible.
Yeah, it's doable.
Yeah.
Well, Sean, thank you so much. As always, fun. We covered a lot of really important everything, and hopefully everyone feels inspired and sees that, if there's one thing you can take away from this podcast, is just put a little more love into the world, put a little more love into yourself, your children, your garden, your relationships. I think if the more love we put into the world, the more love grows in the world. And I think if you're confused about what to do due to the fact that it seems like we're attacked from every angle, then, let love be your guide and see what happens when we pour love on the earth instead of chemicals. And
amen to that, brother.
What's that? Yeah.
Amen to that, brother.
Yeah. So please share any final comments you have, Sean, or any thoughts of your own or parting inspirations, and any websites or offerings or anything you want to share so people know how to reach you.
So I'm fascinated by you mentioned the word compassion many times in this podcast, Paul. So for me, I think there are 5 levels to compassion.
Mm-hmm.
At the very first level is neurological. We literally have mirror neurons, such that when we see somebody else suffering, the same areas of my brain, the observer, are activated as are in the brain of the person who is suffering. So a neurological response. The second one, I think, is a psychological response. Now my heart aches for the pain of the other. Then the third one is a sociological response. I have to do some kind of practical things, like, let's say somebody has been diagnosed with cancer and I start bringing meals over to the household or taking the person to the hospital, so that's a kind of a sociological outreach. The fourth one will be kind of religious, and that is prayer. And I believe very strongly in the power of intentional, focused prayer to alleviate the sufferings of others. And then the final one is the mystical. And that's the realization that ultimately this is God's gig. Now, when I've done everything I can do, this is a personal contract between God and this particular soul. And once I've intervened in whatever way I can, I have to hand over to God and say, okay, this is your child. And now you take control of it. I've done what I can do. Yeah.
Very, very good. And all of it requires us to do our part before we hand it over.
Yes. Yes.
Because otherwise we're handing it over as a cop-out,
Yeah, exactly.
I think what rises in me is to remember that until we get to the 5th level of compassion, we are actually the hands.
Yes. Yes.
We are the hands that touch. We are the hands that buy food, bring food, make food, drive the car to the hospital, get the medicine, make the medicine. I just think if each of us remembers that not only are we the hands, but each of us has special hands that have unique skills and abilities. And now is a really good time to be handy in the world,
Yeah.
Instead of handicapped, right? Where can people find you, and anything that you want to announce or share?
Probably my website is best. It's spiritsandspacesuits.com. Yeah, so all of the lectures I've done and podcasts I've done and books I've written and Sunday homilies, they're all available there for free. Anybody can access them.
Great.
Yeah.
Anything new coming up?
I'm doing a lot of podcasting at the moment. I love this interview style. And so I'm thinking about a new book at this stage. And I'm kind of wondering what the title is going to be. But it's going to be something like, Will the Real Jesus Please Stand Up?
Excellent. I love it. Yeah. Can't wait to read it. Can't wait to do podcasts with you about it. Yeah. Well, beautiful, Sean. Thank you so much. I really, how I feel about hanging out with you, but thank you.
A million thanks to you, my brother. And thanks to Penny for making this happen.
Always. Yeah. Penny's always hard work. She is Mother of More for sure.
Correct.
She manages the galaxy of the Chek family, which is full of stars that move sometimes very fast.
So you got a checkmate.
Yeah, I've got to check a couple of them. It takes 2 to keep this guy in the center of himself. But thank you, Sean, and thank you to the sponsors of the podcast for all your love and support, your amazing products, and for putting money in the hands of organic, biodynamic, and regenerative farmers. And thanks to each of you for anything you buy from the sponsors, because I know you're getting high quality products that are going to do good for keeping you healthy and vital, so you can contribute to everything Sean and I have been talking about today. And thanks for anything you get from the sponsors, because it supports the podcast. So Sean and I can take a little time to hang out with you, because I, like you, have family to feed, bills to pay, and animals to feed. And we all have to let love's boomerang go around to support us all. And thank you guys for doing your very best to be part of the change and just share a little more love. I think if anything came out of this dialogue today, it's just the simplest solution is just do your best to be, as Houston Smith said, be a little kinder and love a little more. However that works for you, it's still adding more love. And I think that's what we need now. I'm working on it every day. And so I love you all, and I'm grateful for all of you. I'm grateful for you, Sean, always. And hey, let's not wait too long to do this again. You know where to find me whenever you got an idea. Hit me with it.
A million thanks to you, Paul.
All right, lots of love.
God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Gym with Paul Chek and today's guest, Sean O'Lear. Visit Sean's website at spiritsinspacesuits.com, where you can read and watch more from Sean, find information on his upcoming events, and watch videos from his past retreats. You can also follow him on Instagram and YouTube at Spirits in Spacesuits. Sean's latest book, Setting God Free, Moving Beyond the Caricature We've Created in Our Own Image, is available on Amazon and Audible. For more interaction with Paul and to share ideas and ask questions about topics discussed in this podcast, we invite you to join his Spirit Gym program and community. There are 3 different levels of membership to fit your budget and lifestyle, where you can participate in live Q&A sessions with Paul's podcast guests, access the members forum within the Spirit Gym community, where you can chat with other members, attend weekly virtual meetups with Paul, and study the comprehensive Master Key online program. Explore the options and subscribe today by going to myspiritgym.com. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.